across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the show. It is delightful to have your company this morning. I'm going to be with you for the next 3 hours, analysing and digging into the news headlines and the big stories this week to give you what I like to think is a pragmatic and truthful appraisal of what is really going on in this country. Although I'll tell you what, it's pretty hard to find out sometimes, isn't it? You've got the sort of surface layer of what you think is happening, the subsurface layer of what you think could be happening, and then there's the truth under, I don't know, about 100 miles of sedimentary rubbish and, you know, lots of hiding and obfuscation and political lies and gaslighting. And I'll tell you something for free, right? The left wing, right, they adore an ism, don't they? They are all for an ism. The lanyardists, racism, xenophobia, homophobism, disablism, transphobism, you name it. They are ism-tastic, but they don't like getting out their own isms, do they? Andy Burnham was apparently saying, we've been living under the shadows of Thatcherism for too long. We've got to get out of that. And so it's like, OK, so what is Burnhamism? Right. We don't know. Because the man seems to chop and change depending on who his audience is. When he's speaking to his far-left cronies, he's all for rejoining the EU, state controlling everything, major intervention, trans people in women's spaces, a lot of it. He signed up to the entire drop-down menu of the lanyard cultists. And now he's in Makerfield, where it turns out that most of the population there don't really go in for that sort of stuff. He is seemingly abandoned it. But has he? Because that's the thing we know already from this government, that what they said in their manifesto and what they said to the press in the run-up to the snap election, which, well, wasn't much, was it, is entirely at odds with what they're actually doing in government. And I think we need to know, because it's very clear to me that the worst possible medicine for the United Kingdom right now is more left-wingery. And yet that seems to be what Burnham believes. Whatever he says, if you look inside that man's shriveled little socialist heart, I think you will find a very distinct strand of leftism, which will probably run the country over the edge of a cliff. So these are big questions. We're going to do our best to answer them, as well as look at some of the other big and strident headlines that have been adorning the front pages of our print press this week. Now, to help us get into the spirit of things with our endeavour to seek some political truth, I'm joined by Henry Hill, who's political editor of The Critic. Good morning, Henry. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you for asking. Now, let us talk about this sort of ding-dong between Tony Blair and Andy Burnham, because I must admit, it's not often that I feel gratitude towards Tony Blair. It's not often that I feel quite happy that he's done a bit of a political intervention from beyond the political grave. But in this instance, I tend to admit I rather liked his sticking his oar in. Andy Burnham, less so, because it seems like Andy Burnham thinks that the way to solve the nation's crises and to finally deliver on the growth that we were promised the Labour Party were dead keen on overseeing in the United Kingdom, he thinks that the way to do that is sweeping state intervention. And it sort of leads you back, after him sort of, you know, attacking Thatcherism, it leads you back to one thing she famously said, which is a problem with the left, is they can't fund anything. They think money grows on trees. Where is the magic money tree? Because state intervention means the state has to pay for things, which means higher taxes. And yet, apparently, he's done a bit of a U-turn on wanting to increase the higher rate of tax. Where do you stand on all of this economic mumbo-jumbo coming out of the Burnham camp?
I mean, he's trying to basically spin up Manchesterism into a thing, right? Into a philosophy akin to Thatcherism, akin to Blairism even. And it's just not. right? Like the main thing that he's known for in Manchester is the fact that he brought the bus network under public coordination. Crucially, only coordination. It's still private companies running the buses, but you know, it's now the B network. That was also wasn't him. That was Sir Richard Lees, the mayor, the leader of the council. So but it's still a private network. And what else has Manchester done for economic growth? Well, Manchester has largely collaborated with business and built an awful lot of houses, which I think any sort of conservative would be happy to tell you is, yeah, that's probably how you deliver economic growth. So the challenge for Burnham is that he really desperately now wants to be running from the left of the party. He has agreed to sign up to Rachel Reeves's fiscal rules, which means that he's got no additional money to spend because Rachel Reeves is spending every penny that she possibly can already. And so, how do you try and spin up a version of, okay, well, what's left wing but doesn't involve spending more money? It's public control. Crucially, public control is not public ownership. It's a much vaguer term, which means he can get away without having to do anything cripplingly expensive like nationalize things. But it's also just very hard to see how Andy's like analysis is serious. Like if you really look at this country, we've abolished prices in nearly everything, right? Price of labor, wages set by the government, price of housing, a massive shortage set by the government, price of energy capped by the government. Those are the three biggest things that feed into whether or not we have economic growth. So actually, what this country desperately needs is a bit of deregulation, a bit of an ability to people to keep more of what they earn and spend that money in the economy rather than constantly sucking people's wages out in tax in order to prop up welfare spending. But Andy Burnham could never admit that, and so that's probably a lesson we're going to have to learn the hard way.
Well, this is the thing. He seems to sort of come up with some pretty populist left-wing policy ideas. You know, he seems to be a fan of state control, possibly renationalisation. We all know the price tag of buying out all the foreign investments in our infrastructure is more than the public purse can handle. But then when it comes to things such as public oversight, even if using private companies, well, that means the taxpayer's having to pay those wages. And it's very clear we are not in a position to splash the cash right now. And I do wonder, the markets have already been spooked by the idea of Andy Burnham. I mean, he's had to come out and say certain things on the record to calm them down. So it seems to me that whatever anyone claims they're going to do, unless we have a more radical shift to the right wing, it's going to be more of the same.
Yeah, in terms of how the markets react, it depends on what they're talking about doing. So, for example, Labour has, as they like to say, quote unquote, renationalised the railways. Right now, as you and I know, and anyone who's vaguely familiar with the railways knows, the railways were basically never privatised. They sold short-term operating rights to private companies, but you had to get everything done by the DfT. Right, if you wanted to add one carriage to one train as a train operator, you had to get the Department of Transport to sign it off. So we really already had a nationalized network. What they're losing out on is the money that those private companies bid for the right to put their names on the side of the trains, basically. Now, is that good for the railway network? Probably not. But is it going to cause an immediate collapse in the government finances? No, I think that the markets would probably trust that what will happen is we'll just gradually starve the railway of a little bit of investment, and it'll get worse and worse over like 10, 15 years, which doesn't bother the bond markets. The thing that will bother the bond markets is if he tries to do anything big. Right, tries to do you talked about the price tag on a proper nationalization. That is big stuff. Or alternatively, if he ended up trying to break any of the fiscal rules regarding so-called debt financing of current expenditure, that means your day-to-day spending on welfare, pensions, and so on, rather than capital investment. Now, of course, the problem is that that box of scary things that scares the bond markets is also the thing that has all the nice shiny toys for your left-wing Labour members when you're in the leadership contest. That's all the exciting stuff. And so it will be really interesting to see whether or not he manages to hold the line on this very sort of disciplined position that's going to disappoint a lot of people, which is sticking to Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules, which does invite the question, why the hell are we replacing the Prime Minister if we're going to be keeping the fiscal rules that are entirely defining his government?
Right, why are we changing the Prime Minister if it's just going to be exactly the same set of policies? Because one imagines that's what they're boxed into. You can either move right, but I think we don't have the economy to move any further left. Talking about the right, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, as he is now, has appeared on television talking about wanting to unite the right. That is, everybody but Restore Britain. I want to focus in on this because it doesn't surprise me that the Conservatives are trying to elbow their way towards the levers of power. I think it rather suits them to see Reform UK under fire from a party further to the right because it's compressing Reform UK's potential to get an overall majority, which means come the event of a general election, indeed possibly a snap general election. If Burnham becomes the Prime Minister and all of a sudden Labour see a boost in polling fortunes, then if the Reform UK support is quashed, they would need to turn to the Conservative Party in order to form a government, in order to stop a coalition on the left, which means essentially anything they want to do will have to be signed off by the Conservatives, and hey presto, the same lot are back in power. I want to know what you make of all of this and what's going on, because, you know, it seems to me that once upon a time the Conservative Party were very lucky to essentially have a bit of a monopoly on the right wing of politics until along came UKIP, and back then I would argue that UKIP 1.0 and the then Conservative Party were diametrically different. You had the David Cameron government on one hand who wanted to stay in the EU, hug hoodies, you know, play about with huskies in Alaska and talk about net zero and loved a bit of immigration, compared to Farageism, which I think we can call an ism. But now it seems to me that all these grappling parties on the right have all adopted Farageism, and so they're just taking chunks out of each other for no reason.
Yeah, that is broadly correct. I think they suffer a bit from the fact that Farageism is not yet terribly well defined on an awful lot of issues, particularly the economy and public spending. Because if you look at Reform UK and who Reform UK's voters are, compared to the classical Conservative coalition, which was more southern and a bit wealthier, they have a different relationship with public spending. Perfectly legitimate, and it's good to see that Nigel Farage has managed to break right-wing politics out of that sort of well-heeled cul-de-sac that it had been stuck in. But nonetheless, there are lots of differences still to work out. Inside the Tory party, there is basically it's not an open war, but there is a deep struggle going on under the surface about basically what they do about Reform UK. And there are two options here. The first one is the one that we've had from Jacob Rees-Mogg, which is, look, we are a party of the right, whether we like it or not. There is a realignment on the right going on at the moment, and that means that we need to work out what our relationship with Reform UK is. And that probably means, depending on how things play out at subsequent elections, that you're looking either at some sort of electoral arrangement like they have between the right-wing parties in Australia, maybe an eventual merger like happened between the Reform Party and the Conservatives in Canada, or a loose alliance like there is in New Zealand. On the other hand, this is the really interesting thing, there are other Tory MPs, hangovers from that Cameroon era that you were talking about, who view it as actually they think that the Conservative Party should be part of the cordon sanitaire, keeping reform out in the event that there is a hung parliament after the next election. So that actually this is a group of Tory MPs who think that their role, or the party's proper role in the event of a hung parliament, would be to go into that coalition that you were just talking about, right? Or to offer a confidence and supply agreement to a Labour government in order to keep Nigel Farage out of office. Now, they haven't really said that openly yet, but they're looking at places like Bexley, where if you look at the Conservatives, the local elections, the Conservative vote hold up fairly well because they managed to attract Labour and Lib Dem anti-reform tactical votes. But that is a fundamental split. I've said before, the Tories really needed to have a really profound political ideological row during their leadership contest in 2024. They didn't have it. And so all of this stuff is now bubbling away below the surface.
But what do you make of the idea? I mean, look, we've seen for a long time that the Conservative Party essentially got voted out during the last general election. I would say rather than the Labour Party being voted in, when you look at the fact that the Labour Party got fewer votes last time round than they had done under Jeremy Corbyn. But that is the risk with the Conservative Party. They say one thing and they seem to do another. Their instinct is to do something completely different when in office. And one wonders, therefore, what what people like, say you and I'm going to sort of drag you into this, assuming our politics are very similar. What do we do in this circumstance? Because there's all sorts of purists out there saying, well, reform have drifted too far to the centre. I can't see it myself when you look at some of the policy announcements. I think by and large what Zia Youssef has outlined in terms of immigration policy seems to go further in terms of having the bricks and mortar in place than even Restore Britain advocates. So I'm never quite clear what they are, because what Rupert Lowe says in his platitudes is very different when he's sitting down and having a cosy conversation with a right-leaning, more traditional Conservative journalist. But what we have got is a situation where it seemed for a moment about 3, 4, 5 months ago, we might finally have a truly right-wing government in power, regardless of what you think of Farage, regardless of where other people, you know, where some of his other policies might lie, but something very different to anything that's taken place in the last half century. And it seemed almost inevitable with, you know, 200-odd polls all pointing to Reform being able to win a general election, to all of a sudden seeing that hope fade somewhat. From your point of view, Henry, what do you think? What would you like to come to pass? How should we get there?
How should we get to a right-wing government?
Yeah, something that's going to deliver something different to what has been repeatedly rejected by the public at the ballot box.
So it is very challenging because, as you say, the Conservative Party has basically been the entire elected political right in this country outside Northern Ireland for decades, right? Compared to a country, if you look just over the channel in France, where they have like quite diverse right with lots of parties and organisations that all stretch back decades. Here, you've got the Conservative Party, and then you've basically got the things that Nigel Farage has built over the last sort of 10, 15 years. And that means that you have a problem in that Nigel Farage's parties, sorry, I'm terribly sorry about that.
How dare you?
Nigel Farage's parties are new. They don't have that history, and you can see the benefits of that when they start winning in places like Liverpool, where the Conservatives haven't been able to win in decades and decades. But on the other hand, they just don't have enough people, right? I mean, sort of good people. It takes a certain amount of people to actually have enough good MPs to be ministers, to have people to appoint to enough quangos, assuming you're not abolishing them, but even then you need people in departments. And so the question has always been, how much of the existing Conservative Party do you need to defect from its old position to a new sort of more Farageist position? And how does that happen? And so the row I just talked about inside the Conservative Party is an aspect of this, and I think it will probably be good for the long-term health of the right if those two sections of the Conservative Party eventually end up in different parties, which they probably will, right? But it might take another election for that to happen.
I mean, this is the interesting thing. Are you sort of saying then, because the Reform have come under a lot of criticism from people who are a bit more purist on the right and say, look, you've got all these failed Tories. You've got the people who presided over the distribution of the vaccine, Robert Jenrick, who was immigration minister during things like the Boris wave. You know, are they suddenly brand new magical characters who we can trust? Some would argue that Reform's taken a bit of a drubbing as a result of taking on those Conservatives. But you might suggest that actually this has been a pragmatic thing to do, because it's all very well saying, oh, yes, we're going to be radically different. But unless you have that depth and breadth of experience, people who know the machinations of Whitehall, then you're going to be all talk and no trousers.
Partly, yeah. I'm certainly not saying that the Conservative Party doesn't deserve a lot of criticism. I have given it a lot of criticism. But it's also important to remember that it can be quite naive to simply vest all of your hopes in people who haven't had the opportunity to fail yet, right? There is a reason that the Conservatives ended up doing so many things in office that they officially deprecated, right? Like, why do governments keep hitting the immigration button? Because in the short term, it brings in people who pay taxes, which allow them to pay out pensions and social care without having to put taxes even further up in the short term. Now, I think most people, certainly watching this channel, would agree that in the long term, doing that is very, very bad for the country and has done terrible things to our economy. But if you stop doing it in the short term, that means you have to either cut pensions or put taxes up, and everyone hates that. So there are compromises that need to be made in office and challenges that need to be faced. Now, it is important for Farage not to simply allow his party to be colonized by the Tories, right? Because it is a new party, and you can see that, right? In of the 98 seats where Reform UK came second in 2024, 89 of them are Labour held, right? He is not just talking about leading a replacement Tory party, he is leading a new force. He's built himself with a different map. That is absolutely true. But as it stands, certainly if we don't get a change to the electoral system, there will only be a right-wing government in this country if the various bits of the right, the major bits of the right, Conservatives and Reform UK currently, are able to work together.
What do you make of Restore Britain?
So I had a golden rule that I actually wouldn't talk about Restore Britain until somebody mentioned them to me in the reef rolls, just because
I think that sort of says out loud what you make of them, but
well, the thing is that that rule has broken, right? Because there was that poll by the Times which showed them at third place and 7% in upcoming contest, which is actually subject to PERDA, so never mind. But the question is, Rupert Lowe is an amazing local campaigner. He's done extraordinarily well in Great Yarmouth in terms of building up his own seat, winning affiliated council seats. Can he turn that into a national movement? Like, look how long it took Nigel Farage to do it, right? Like, if you think back from the start of UKIP in the early to mid 1990s, the sheer amount of time that Nigel Farage has had to spend fighting his way up, using the European Parliament elections to get those breakthroughs, to get that money, he hasn't even had a chance to go into government yet, and we're already looking at another party trying to do the same thing. It represents, I think, impatience on the part of some of Nigel Farage's voters, but really at this point, and people have the right to vote for who they want, no one is entitled to the vote of any voter, it's important to say, but the most likely option at the moment is that if Restore Britain did take off as a national force, it would just make some kind of left-wing rainbow coalition, Labour, Green, Liberal, Nationalist, more likely after the next election.
Very pragmatically put, Henry, thank you ever so much. Right, it is PERDA, so that means the list. Here we go. Are you sitting comfortably? I will begin. Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats. Count Binface, the Count Binface Party. Andy Burnham, the Labour Party. Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party. John Dyer, standing as an independent. Ed Gemmell, the Climate Party. Paul Gold, another independent. Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official monster raving loony party. Looks like they've also had their splits. Robert Kenyon, Reform UK. Robert Pownell, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield to the Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin EU. And Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. Those, ladies and gentlemen, are your runners and riders. And vote for whoever you think is the best person to be in Parliament. That is, if you're in Makerfield. The rest of us, well, we're just passengers in all of this. OK, right, we're going to be taking a short break now. If you want to contact the show, the number to call is 03444 1000. The brilliant Kieran is waiting to take down your details. We're going to be hopefully doing some calls after this next break. It's your normal network rate, so don't be coy. If you've got something on your mind, why don't you vent it right here, right now, in some national communal catharsis? 87222 is the number to send a text message to if you're going to do that. You have to write the word talk before you text. You can also, of course, send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on 03444 1000. Lisa says, Alex, did you enjoy your cheese rolling? Saw brilliant pictures in the paper. I did, of course, go to the annual Gloucester cheese roll on Monday. What a weird thing that is. But, you know, I'm from Gloucester. I know how weird we are. I tell you what, though, my goodness. I mean, I actually broke my top of my arm on that hill when I was 14 years old, riding a horse. But even every video in the world of people sort of tumbling like toys down the side of that really steep bank does not give you any idea of quite how steep it is. When you stand at the top and look over it, it feels a bit like looking over the edge of a cliff, and you think, right, do you really want a wheel of double Gloucester that much? But people came from all over the world. The winner, in fact, was a young man who originated from Germany, but there was a team who'd flown in from Japan. There was even a man from Italy who'd flown in the day before, stayed in a local B&B, did the cheese roll, and was going straight off to get his plane explain afterwards. It now attracts multinational visitors. It's a huge event. It was boiling hot, but do you know what? The wonderful heritage of wherever that came from, why we do it, is banned now, but you can't tell the people of Gloucester to not do it. It's too much part of who we are. And I just like these sort of interesting legacy events that makes us what we are. And it was really great being back among my kinfolk. Right, OK, we're going to take a short break now, but coming up, your calls and your messages, so keep them coming in. Back in just a moment.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, my lovely little sausages. Shall we hit up the blower? Let's speak to Herbie, who's in Harrow. Good morning, Herbie.
Good morning, Alex. Here this morning.
I'm so happy this morning. I've just had the most beautiful... You know what? When you've got a big old heat wave like we've just had and you live in the countryside like me, it was heaven. Everyone I've come into London was like, oh, God, it's been so hot. It's been stifling. Oh, no, it's still... And I'm like, oh, no. Where I was, it was just mwah, chef's kiss.
Oh, I can imagine it. Well, I shall be down on the coast myself this weekend. I shall be my holiday home.
Yeah,
and
where are you off to then?
Suffolk.
Oh, are you? I'm going to the East Coast. I'm going down to the South Coast. I'm going to walk the Seven Sisters tomorrow.
Oh, right, lovely. Yeah, when I have my patio door, Alex, 50 yards and there's the sea. Nothing in front of me.
Oh, how beautiful. What a British idyll, you lucky man.
Oh, lovely. I'll tell you what, I'm going to enjoy that completely because I did that on Monday and I thought this is it. This is ideal. I can sit outside, have a nice cup of coffee and breakfast and enjoy it with the sea breeze. Oh. Lovely. Nothing in front of me. Right, Alex, people are starting to wake up. They smelt the coffee at last. They're beginning to understand what party politics is all about and what is going on. And it's about time the wake-up call came because they need to speak to the people. This is what they need to do. They need to talk to the people to tell them what they're going to do for a change, not what the party's going to do. It's what the people want.
So expand on this a bit more for me, would you, Herbie? Who are we talking about when we talk about people waking up to party politics? Let's get into the weeds of this.
Well, when you talk to people, you know, and understand what they're going to vote for, and you say, why are you voting for this and why are you voting for that? Well, when you actually describe what things are going to do and what's going to happen, they begin to realise that perhaps they've gone down the wrong road in the past, but now they can see what is actually going on. They're more aware of what party politics is all about, what policies are all about, what the MPs are all about. What are they going to do? They need to ask the MP or the person standing, what are you going to do for me and the borough or the area that I live in? What are you going to do for us for a change? Not what you can do for you, what are you going to do for us? That's what we want to know.
But it's a difficulty here. I mean, look, I agree in many respects that something quite radical has happened in politics across the West, which is that ever since the inception of digital media and social media and a sort of opened up dialogue politically, it's completely broken the old legacy two-party system. The binary choice is no longer. And yet at the same time, we're flooded with information on, they said this 6 months ago, now they're saying that. So who do we believe? The Andy Burnham of 6 months ago or the Andy Burnham now? Or we hear sort of big platitudes being made on social media, bold statements like, we're going to grow the economy. And then you think, well, OK, but you haven't. You've had 2 years and you've not done it. Or we're going to deport millions. By what mechanism? And is this actually achievable? I still feel like at the moment it's if anything, become even more confusing, because at least once upon a time, you sort of went, am I left wing, am I right wing? Whereas now it's sort of, you know, you've got all these sort of choices. It's a generation game conveyor belt, but you can't touch the thing and shake it to see what's really inside.
Alex, are you there?
Of course I'm here. Yeah. If I went, there'd be no show.
No, sorry. Yeah, no. The thing is though, people are starting to ask questions. What is going on? What are you going? As I said, what are you going to do for us? What are you going to do for the area? This is what they need to ask. And they need to make sure that they carry out the promises that they say they're going to do. People, as I say, are much more aware today. They get better educated on politics and they understand politics a lot more. It's time for change. And the only way you're going to get change is by making sure you listen and talk to the people that you're hoping to get the vote for. I keep saying to people, your vote is yours for the rest of your life. If you vote for me and I don't perform, I get sacked by you, but you still got your vote, which is yours forever and ever. Amen.
I love that. Do you know what, Herbie? That is very, very good advice to anybody who might be in Makerfield. Interrogate the information and vote not on vibes. Really interrogate all the information and vote on good research is, I think, what Herbie is suggesting. And I like that. Your vote is your vote for the rest of your life. And we're very privileged as a nation to have that vote. Herbie, thank you ever so much. Let's speak now to Matthew, who's in Warrington. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Alex. Hope you're well. Hope you had a good bank holiday. Sounds like you had fun.
Lovely bank holiday.
Yeah, Burnham. So he wants to brings back all the utilities back into public ownership. I will have a pint of what that man's been drinking and put my beer goggles on, because I can remember what it was like in the 70s and the 80s when we had the unions dictating our coal, our railways, everything was unionised. That's why Thatcher came in to break it up, because he couldn't carry on. The unions had us by the short and curlies, and they were twisting it tighter and tighter every day. We couldn't bury the dead. We had bins piled up everywhere. We had a 4-day week, electric strikes. And for the Labour Party now, for Burnham to go on about Thatcherism, she stood down in 1991. We've had 3 Labour governments with Blair, and the damage that he's done. So if that is all he can drag up from the past to make things look a bit more in his rose-tinted glasses, he looks at it's just it's pie in the sky. The country's moved on. We need to be addressing our welfare problems, our National Health Service, our military problems.
Yeah.
Not talking on about Thatcher. She's pushing up daisies. She's long gone. She's one of the best prime ministers since Churchill. Get over yourself, mate.
I know, I totally agree. Both the Labour Party and the Conservatives always invoke Margaret Thatcher, and I kind of think this woman lived in an era before the internet, social media, Zoom calls, short-haul flights, you know, the sort of globalisation in reality that the world has seen. So you can't just take those policies and whack them into today, but you're right. Usually renationalising things or public oversight comes with a pretty hefty price tag, and I'm not particularly sure we have the money to afford any of it. Matthew, very good call. Thank you ever so much. We're going to be taking a short break and talking about the money to afford any of it. Apparently, the Defence Investment Plan should have been printed by now. It's been a year since this government commissioned research into how, where and what defence should be spending taxpayers' money on and how they're going to afford an uptick in defence spending. Well, despite that report having been drafted a year ago, there is still no noises coming out of the government, largely because, well, that magic money tree doesn't seem to be bearing a lot of fruit for them, does it? We're going to be discussing that and what is going on in the world of geopolitics as a Russian drone has smashed into a block of flats in Romania, and US and Iran could be very close to a deal, but not there yet, according to JD Vance. A lot to talk about in the world of defence. That's coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, how perfectly timed that just as we're about to talk about everything defence, it turns out the Labour Party have come out and said this, that given the nation is in the grip of the worst youth worklessness crisis since records began, Labour has told unemployed young people to consider joining the military instead of going to university. This is because 1 million 12 to 24-year-olds have been revealed to neither be in employment nor education at the highest level in more than 25 years. Louise Sanders-Jones, the Defence Minister, said to The Telegraph, young people struggling to begin their careers should think seriously about a job in the armed forces. Let's speak now to Lord Richard Dannett, former head of the British Army. Lord Dannett, thank you for coming on the programme today. We have got a lot to get through, so let's rumble through everything. First of all, what do you make of this? Because the first thing that sticks in my mind, I think it would do the younger generations the world of good, quite frankly, to be in the military, learn a bit of early morning alarms and spit and polish, hierarchy, good physical health and mental acuity. Except if I was a young person from the outside looking in and I see veterans on the street and former veterans being engaged in a witch hunt for the troubles in Northern Ireland, etc., I'm not sure I'd really want to take up this offer.
Well, you've thrown a lot of issues onto the table in one go there, Alex. But I think come back to what the Labour Party has said, apparently, which you've just quoted. I think it is a serious and sensible option for young people who haven't got a job to think about at least having a few years in the armed forces for many of the reasons that you just described. It's a job, they'll get paid for it, they get well trained. They'll pick up all kinds of life skills that will be really, really useful later on. And they'll get used to working with other people, becoming more self-reliant and more confident. There's a lot to be said for even just 3 or 4 years in the armed forces can give a young person a really good head start in life, and they will be really good employees for civilian companies after that.
Let's talk now, because one of the things I also mentioned was, what is perceived by some in the military as a bit of a witch hunt that's taken place in the sort of persecution of British troops. And we've learnt today, in the BBC have run a story where a former Chief of Staff of UK Special Forces told a public inquiry he believed war crimes allegations against the SAS were not referred to military police out of concern that an investigation could disrupt operations and negatively affect morale. Now, this is sort of based upon something that's been rumbling along for a long time, which is investigating allegations that the SAS committed extrajudicial killings, war crimes on operations between 2010 and 2013. What do you make of this in terms of if these things were sort of temporarily brushed under the carpet so as not to dampen morale? Is that the right thing to do? Is this part of a witch hunt, perhaps?
Well, again, you've raised quite a lot of issues there. There's no getting away from the fact that if a commanding officer of any unit thinks that something improper has occurred, something potentially illegal has occurred, it is his duty to report it to the service police and for that to be investigated. And it would appear that that has not happened as far as this is concerned. Now, they're justifying it by not wanting to have another witch hunt, not wanting to damage the morale of their special forces units, and I can understand that thinking, but I'm afraid scrape it to the core. Whether you're in a regular line unit or whether you're in a special forces unit, the responsibility is there on the commanding officer. If there is a suspicion that something has been done that's against the law, that is reported to the service police and investigated at the time, and the consequences have to be accepted. So if that turns out to be the case, and I don't know, but if that turns out to be the case, then some senior officers will have exercised poor judgment.
Let us talk now about the deadline for this extremely long delayed defence investment plan. We risk, don't we, as a country, going to the next G7 summit without being able to say what we're going to do militarily, if we're going to increase our defence spending, how and by what margin. But worse than that, the next NATO summit, because the governments have had this report for a long time now, and it seems to me the suggestion is that the blockages are coming from, well, potentially number 10 itself, because they don't really know. They've made promises to increase defence spending, but they don't really know how they're going to fund this. And there must be a whole load of arms manufacturers, etc., sitting there saying, well, look, we're happy to get the machines going and, pumping out whatever you need made for defence investment, but you're not telling us what we're supposed to be doing.
No, you're absolutely right. The Strategic Defence Review was published getting on for a year ago. That should have been followed last autumn with the Defence Investment Plan, and we've not seen that. And until we see that Defence Investment Plan and the Ministry of Defence knows what additional money it's got, it then can't let contracts to British industry to produce the weapons and the ammunition and on the other matters that are required for the British Armed Forces. And of course, here's an irony. If that money starts to flow to industry, then that will actually aid growth in the country, which itself will expand the envelope and make more taxes available to the Treasury. And so we'll be on the beneficial upward track. So, frankly, come on, number 10 and number 11, put your money now where your mouth has been, and let's get the country properly secured. It's not that generals, admirals, air marshals want to fight wars, but what we want to make sure is we've got the military capability to deter further aggression, and that further aggression is most likely to come, as far as we're concerned, from Russia.
Which segues me very nicely into another story, which is the fact, and it's sort of, I'm surprised it's not being writ larger on legacy media channels, but the fact that a Russian drone has smashed into a block of flats in NATO, in Romania. NATO had to scramble fighter jets. In fact, the strike left multiple people injured. I think the feeling here is that this drone wasn't necessarily destined for Romania, but sort of went a little bit off course en route to Ukraine. But this actually, suggests that it's one of these sort of events, isn't it? A bit of a black swan event that could be the blue touch paper for things escalating.
No, I think you're right. I think in all probability, again, I don't know, that the drone that struck an apartment block in Romania just over the border from Ukraine was itself destined to strike a target in Ukraine. It happened to hit a target on the other side of the Danube in Romania. Now, you could also look at it a different way and say, well, perhaps this was actually a plan by the Russians to see what the reaction of Romania and other NATO nations would be. Would we consider this a breach of Article 5 or a requirement to enact Article 5? An attack on one member is an attack on all. I think that's probably not the case. I think it's probably more likely, on balance of probabilities, that it was a drone that struck a Romanian target by accident. But it's exactly the sort of thing that Russia may well try and do in the future to test the resolve of NATO. And I think we see this more likely to occur if and when there is a ceasefire in Ukraine. That will give the opportunity for the Russian armed forces to reconstitute it. And then who knows, they might push again in Ukraine, they might push in one of the Baltic states. And that would be to test the solidarity of NATO and to see whether Article 5 really is worth the words and the paper that it's written on.
Now, of course, there is another big conflict going on in the world, which is that between US and Iran, who, I mean, I live just downwind of Fairford, and I seem to know what's going to be in the papers the next day, just listening to what's going over my house on a night time. It's certainly been pretty busy at the bottom of the apron, I can tell you that much. But apparently, J.D. Vance, the Vice President, who's less hawkish, let's say, than Donald Trump when it comes to foreign intervention, believes that the US and Iran could be very close to a deal, but they're just not there yet. And it seems to me that we heard this before. It was released to the press, this idea that Pakistan had been able to broker something, Iran was getting involved, that actually maybe the parliamentary wing, at least of Iran, wanted to sort of shake hands and cease military engagement. And then it turns out that the Americans had to send in bombers to deal with Iranian ships trying to put mines in the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, even if we are hearing that we're close to a deal, what is that worth in terms of reassurance? Because it strikes me that maybe the politicians of Iran have one thing in mind and the IRGC quite another.
Yes, I think you're right. I don't think we're close to a deal at all. I think what we might be close to is agreeing an agenda which will form the basis of subsequent talks. Now, if that includes, say, another 60-day ceasefire, and possibly, because it's in not just the West's interest, it's in Iran's interest as well, to allow shipping to transit through the Straits of Hormuz again, we might see that happening. But any talk of a deal, wrapping up the whole thing, I think is way off the track at the present moment. I think much more likely that they're agreeing the terms of an agenda for proper talks to start. And why I say it's in the Iranians' interest probably to let shipping go through the Straits of Hormuz, a lot of Iranian oil finds its way to China, and Iran needs that bit of trade as well. Of course, from the US's point of view, the closure of the Straits of Hormuz as a result of Donald Trump's war is very much skewing the economy of most countries in the West.
Lord Dan, it's always a privilege having you on the programme. Thank you for giving up part of your morning to get us informed today. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be speaking to the inimitable Peter Bleksley, former Met Police detective, about the really shocking story about that poor young lad, teenage stab victim, who, rather than being given urgent medical care, was handcuffed and arrested because he had been accused of racism. It is a story that, frankly, should have shocked the world, not being given its fair hearing, unsurprisingly, on legacy media. We're going to be speaking to Peter Bleksley about what he makes of all of that after this.
for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Imagine having somebody come up, stab you in order to mug you. Imagine then lying on the floor, your lungs filling up with blood, and the police turn up. But rather than arrest the assailant, they arrest you. They arrest you because your assailant has already thought this through, has already been on the phone to the police, claiming that he, in fact, is the victim of some sort of racist attack. And despite, with your last breaths, pleading with the arresting officers that you have been stabbed, they do nothing. They don't believe you. Surely this is the sort of situation that would invite international outcry. Certainly when American police were accused of racism when George Floyd died, saying that he couldn't breathe while being subjected to an arrest. Oh gosh, half the world was taking knees and suddenly funding BLM. The Premier League went absolutely mad on it. Think of all the lanyards that were made off the back of that. And yet it's different, isn't it? It's different when the victim happens to be a young white man and the perpetrator a non-white man. How grotesque that just the word racism these days seems to completely reprogram common sense, pragmatism and proper protocol. So much so that this young man, Henry Novak, is now no longer with us. An 18-year-old with the rest of his life ahead of him. Let's speak to Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective. Peter, I can only imagine how incensed you are at this story.
At the very, very best that I can make of this scenario, the police officers that were first to arrive on scene showed a shocking and unforgivable lack of professional curiosity. The kind of curiosity that every investigator, every police officer should be bestowed with in bucket loads. At the very worst, these officers were racist towards Henry Novak, inasmuch as that they immediately believed the word of a brown-faced person above the word of a white-faced person. And consequently, Henry Novak was arrested and handcuffed. Either way you look at it, this is an appalling situation.
And how much of this, I mean, I've been saying for about a week now that, you know, forget everything else, one of the most deadly things in our society are blimmin' lanyards. And I was speaking to a friend about this yesterday, basically saying when you have people in critical public-facing duties who have all gone through this sort of factory of reprogramming the brain to see everything through the prism of race, and that becomes the dominating driving force in how they might respond to a house fire, or how they might respond to a stabbing, or how they might respond to a drugs bust, or how they might respond to giving critical care. That this sort of brain rot, frankly, is proving lethal.
Yes, it is. And we only have to look at other examples, like Valdo Calacane, for example, who was not sectioned because they were concerned about the disproportionality of black people being sectioned. You only have to look at Axel Rudapakana and his carnage in Southport, for example, because, of course, there were people afraid to mention the blatantly obvious that he was black. And so it goes on. This anti-racism kind of training, this woke, progressive, liberal mindset that pollutes so many in the public service, that clearly polluted the brains of the police officers involved here, insomuch as that they showed such a lack of professional curiosity that they took the word of one man over another without immediately questioning it. And back in the day, we had the ABC of policing. It would never survive today. The A was accept nothing. The B was believe nobody. And the C, most importantly, was check everything. And in this case, as soon as a young man said, I'd been stabbed, wouldn't you check to see where the wounds were and see if you could help preserve his life? I certainly would have done.
Well, this is what I find utterly fascinating with all of this, considering he was stabbed in the back, in the front, that his young body was being filled with internal bleeding. The fact that someone was there, I mean, I think he discarded his ceremonial knife, but how could they have missed that? How could they have missed such catastrophic injuries?
Well, I've already seen certain senior police officers who spent most of their careers driving desks rather than police cars, leaping to the defence so predictably, saying, well, they were told by the control room. They'd been told twice that it was an allegation of racism against the white man who'd attacked the brown-faced man. I don't really care, because when you are speeding to an incident, yes, you receive some information, but the minute you arrive, you take in your surroundings, you inquire, you question, you look, you listen, and you make your judgments accordingly. You do not leap to prejudgment based on what you are told over a police radio.
Thank you ever so much for joining us today, Peter Bleksley. I cannot get over this story. I cannot. And what disgusts me is, you know, they're all in on it. They're all in on this woke mind virus. They all don't want to let go of the critical race training because they've bowed down at the altar of the anti-racism movement for so long. They can't let go now, or they can't be proven wrong, even though now we're getting the sharp end of that. We're getting these news stories. We can see what happened to the multitude of young white girls raped and abused by, broadly speaking, Pakistani men, covered up because of racism. We can see what's happened to young Henry Novak. We can see what happened to the victims of Valdo Calacane. We know what happened when Axel Rudakabana wasn't referred again and again to prevent because of racism. People, lanyards, kill. We've got to get past this. We've got to move on. I've had enough. And when lives start being lost, that is the end. Right. Taking a short break, don't go anywhere because I am back with more news just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Welcome back to the show. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? Anyway, thank you so much for your company thus far. If you've only just joined me, where have you been? I've been missing you. Why are you late today? Anyway, it's nice to be all gathered together, isn't it, on a Friday morning to review what has been going on in the news during the week. And there's a lot to talk about, particularly... well, Mr. Andy Burnham, if he's going to be our future Prime Minister, I think we deserve to know what Burnhamism is. And yet it's a bit like trying to get a bar of soap in the shower, isn't it? Because everyone talks about a flip-flop Kia. Well, if Starmer seems to be changing his mind every 5 seconds on what Starmerism is, if there was ever such a thing in the first place, Lord knows what we should ascertain from Andy Burnham, who wants to rejoin the EU. No, he doesn't, because he thinks that those arguments are, not worth having anymore. Well, not worth having if you're trying to win the seat of Makerfield, is it? Then he seems to say, yes, we must increase the top level of tax, and then seems to have decided that he's going to stick with Rachel Reeves' promise to not increase taxes on working people, although what are they? Who knows? He's done 5 flip-flops so far. So when we look at, what we might be getting if he wins the Makerfield by-election, well, it's blimmin' hard to say, isn't it? One thing's true, though. He seems to be doing everything not to spook the markets and not to spook the denizens of Makerfield. Let's speak to Paul Embry, a trade unionist and author of Despised: Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. Now, we've seen this in politics. It's nothing new, is it, that a politician might somewhat spin their narrative depending upon which audience they stand in front of. But this is different to, someone saying one thing at a branch meeting and another thing on the doorstep, because this really is the rest of the country looking at this sort of battle, this proxy war going on in Makerfield, and thinking, well, if it comes to pass that this man is our Prime Minister, is he going to do things radically differently? And if so, what?
Yeah, good morning, Alex. He has certainly flip-flopped on a number of things. There's no question about that. And the danger is you think you're appealing more broadly to people by shifting your view according to the prevailing weather and the prevailing mood. But you then alienate, I think, a lot of other people who then say, we don't really know what you stand for, mate. And I think particularly in this day and age where politicians are so robotic and so on message and so frightened about dissenting from the party line, I think people more and more respect those politicians who are a bit honest in their views, actually. I mean, one of my political heroes was Tony Benn. Now, not everyone's cup of tea politically, but he was somebody, he said himself that politicians are divided between signposts and weather vanes. And the signposts are the politicians who say, look, this is what I believe in and follow me because I think you should believe in it as well. And the weather vanes are people who just, form their views according to the latest focus group. And I think there's an element of that with Andy Burnham, and people ultimately, I think, don't necessarily respect those who change their views so quickly and for politically expedient reasons. I mean,
looking at this sort of battle that's now going on between Burnham and Blair, whose side would you take? Because Tony Blair, interestingly, this is sort of quite a telling interview he did with Nick Robinson at the BBC, where it's almost if he was going to start the sentence of, I don't really care who's in power, the Tories or Labour, as long as it's a centrist government. And Andy Burnham, meanwhile, seems to be saying, well, look, Tony Blair inherited Thatcherism and seemed to continue down that road. I want to do things drastically differently, talking a lot more about state intervention. I mean, you're a sort of trade unionist and Labour man at heart. Where do you think is the right direction if you were going to be a signpost, not a weather vane?
Well, look, I mean, I'm a traditional leftist, Alex, as you know. I'm not a modern day leftist. I'm, if you like, an old-fashioned socialist. So I'm more with Burnham than I am with Blair on this particular debate. I'm an old-fashioned Keynesian in many respects. I think that when you're in a situation where your economy is tanking, and certainly about to tank, as it probably will do later this year, And everyone within that economy, whether it's individual consumers or businesses, are tightening their belts. You know, they're making financial calculations and tightening their belts. You then get into that downward spiral, which takes you into a recession. And actually, the only agency really with the power and the money to be able to kickstart the economy in those circumstances, certainly to kickstart it quickly, is government, is using the power of government and the fiscal capacity of government to turn the economy round, to invest in infrastructure and business and the real economy and so on, to get growth. And then through getting growth, you increase your tax revenues and you're able to then fund your public services. So I think Burnham has certainly got a point that under New Labour, they did follow that agenda of rolling back the frontiers of the state, handing pretty much everything over to the market, privatisation, deregulation and so on. And I think in the current circumstances, with the economy on the precipice of a major crash, I think that's not what we need at this moment.
What we do need, though, is a bit of a clear direction of travel, isn't it? If we are going to change the man at the top, what is that man going to be doing differently? Let's talk now about the right wing, which is where Jacob Rees-Mogg, understandably, is called for the right to unite. It doesn't surprise me coming from a Conservative, because, frankly, unless they attach themselves to something else, they're not really going to go anywhere or get anywhere near power. But he has said that if there were to be a pact among right-wingers, that cannot include Restore Britain, because there have been some rather damning revelations of extremism. Certainly mouthpieces for that political party seem to have some pretty choice opinions when it comes to ethno-nationalism. There have been allegations of anti-Semitism. I would certainly join the chorus of others who are saying that certainly some of their acolytes and loudest and most vocal supporters online are women-hating scumbags. I'm certainly not enjoying their attention, but there you go. What do you make of this new movement that has sort of sprung up out of a spat, really, that happened within Reform UK?
I would agree with Jacob Rees-Mogg, actually. If I were advising the Tory party or Reform, I would say you would need to give Restore Britain a very wide berth. Now, there are probably some good people involved with it, but I think it's certainly true that on the fringes, and in some cases not particularly on the fringes, more centrally, there are some people with views that I think probably could be categorised as extreme. And there are certainly people who I think have what I would call an unhealthy focus on the issue of ethnicity. I mean, I call them ethno-obsessives, because it's almost as if they look at every political issue through the prism of ethnicity, and I don't think that's particularly helpful. And some of them, you know, were really leading the charge against Shabana Mahmood when she gave a recent interview and said that even though she's got Pakistani heritage, she considers herself to be English. And they said, how dare you, you know, you're appropriating our culture. But can you imagine if Shabana Mahmood had said the opposite? If she said, actually, I don't regard myself as English. I mean, she even said in the interview, I would support England against Pakistan in a cricket match. And people got angry at that. But just imagine she said the opposite. Right. I would support Pakistan over England.
I mean, let's call it what it is. Look, I'm sorry, let's call it what it is. Frankly, it is racism. And I'm not saying that as a like, whoop, whoop, let's all jump on the left-wing bandwagon of calling everybody racist. No, I'm saying it because when you were judging people by the colour of their skin, the definition of that is racism. And I would say quite the same about agitators on the left wing who also do that with their critical race theory nonsense. Personally, my opinion has always been I care about what's on the inside. I care about culture. In that regard, I would agree with the idea that they seem to espouse that we are a Christian country. And by that, I would like to see the morality and the mores that have sprung over the last 2,000 years from that one religion being sacrosanct in our nation. But when it comes to skin colour, I mean, come on, this ain't 1850 anymore. You know, we've gone beyond this, and it terrifies me. It terrifies me as somebody who has, you know, relatives who are not born and bred, you know, whose, you know, long lost heritage isn't entirely British. It terrifies me that these sorts of ideas are now being pushed.
I share your view. I mean, my own in-laws are Anglo-Indian, and you know, my brother-in-law, for example, was born in India but has lived here every day since he was 2 years of age for the last 60 years or whatever. And I do wonder what some of these ethno-obsessives would think about people like him, who's worked his entire life and paid his taxes and so on. And actually, I don't think that they're radical kind of extremist views on this issue are shared by the vast majority of Britons, because I think most people in Britain will say, look, it's perfectly possible to be, on the one hand, wary of multiculturalism and its impact in terms of social disintegration in the country, wary of the impact of mass immigration. We want to tighten our borders. We want to reassert our national identity. But you know what? We don't want a witch hunt against people on the basis of the fact they've got a skin colour that's a few tones darker than our own. I don't think most people are interested in that sort of thing. And if the likes of the people following Restore think they are, I think they've seriously misjudged it.
Yeah, it also seems to be consistently at odds when Rupert Lowe speaks. He seems to be saying, well, no, we should invite people in who are spouses and make that easier. I don't believe we should be deporting entire communities, you know, so on and so forth. What he seems to say in front of camera when he appears is vastly different to what people like his head of campaign seem to say. And I just think, you know, always be careful, because you never know when you're being used as a chew toy. And what happens to a chew toy is it gets chewed up and spat back out. Let's talk now about Andy Burnham, because he wants to potentially open the door to a pact with the Greens. That hasn't been explicitly what he said, but when challenged in an interview about whether he would form coalitions, if need be, he sort of made the sort of vague platitude that he's willing to work with any political party if it's what's best for the country. But that does suggest to me, when you look at the fracturing of politics away from the sort of legacy two-party system, away from a bipartisan choice to something far more spectral, we are potentially going to be looking at not one political party forming a majority, but some sort of coalition on the left or on the right. And in the same way that we're talking there about Jacob Rees-Mogg saying, well, anything on the right must not involve Restore, those of us who look at the Green Party would love to say to Andy Burnham, do not court them. They're crazy. But unfortunately, it seems to me that when it comes to the Green Party, they really are taking sizable bites out of the Labour Party vote at the moment. And if the Labour Party did want to get in anywhere near the levers of power, a snap election to be held today, one would assume they'd have to cosy up to Polanski.
Well, I think for the Labour Party to do that, I think that would be electoral and political suicide. I would say to Andy Burnham and anyone else who is listening, you need to run a mile from the Greens. I mean, look, they've got some, I think they've had some useful issues to say, some useful things to say on the issue of wealth and income inequality in this country. But on some of their other stuff, I mean, you look at the extremism on trans rights and wanting men who identify as women to be able to access women's sports and women's single-sex spaces and so on. They're pretty much an open borders party. They've completely signed up to the net zero folly and actually want to go further in terms of making some of the targets more challenging. They want to legalise hard drugs. That is not where I think majority opinion is in this country. It may appeal to student radicals and social activists and various people on the far left. It will not appeal to the majority of mainstream voters. And if that's who Labour wants to win over, which I assume they do, they should avoid at all costs getting into bed with Polanski and the Greens.
This is the interesting thing, you know, talking about these little wings on the left and the right that are emerging. And I'd say they're emerging as a direct result of social media. They're a product of algorithms. They're a product of the most strident opinion, the most controversial statements. He who shouts loudest, he who outflanks someone else in terms of the boldness of their rhetoric, suddenly gets pushed to the top of our timelines, suddenly gets to sort of flood the digital airwaves with these sort of more extreme vibesy politics. And so now we're seeing this sort of politics on either side popping up. And it terrifies me. I mean, what do we do about this? Because, look, I don't want to hark back to let's having a uniparty. I'm not here banging the drum for let's go back to the days where you couldn't put a cigarette paper between Labour and the Conservatives. But I certainly don't want to see the sort of unfettered radicalism, the dangerous radicalism that says on one side things like let's have totally open borders and get rid of prevent and decriminalise all drugs and decriminalise sex work, which is with turn us into, I don't know, something akin to Kandahar. And neither do I want something on the other side where we're going around, you know, prosecuting policy based upon the colour of someone's skin, which sounds like Germany in the 1940s, for crying out loud. So while I do want to see radical change, some of these offers that seem to be landing at the moment politically, to me, would take us into oblivion, would take us down a very dangerous path, which, you know, leads me to wonder what we do about this.
Well, I mean, look, there's certainly been a rise in, if you like, radical politics and radical politicians with more militant programs. And I think that is certainly in part attributable to social media. Social media, you know, is in many respects a good thing, but it has its drawbacks as well. But I think probably more attributable to the fact that I think people are just sick and tired with the two main parties, with mainstream politics in this country. And we're seeing now, I think, on a wider UK basis, what happened in Northern Ireland over the last 20 years, where the two dominant parties, the UUP and the SDLP on both sides of the divide, were seen to have failed, no longer had the support of their respective communities, and those communities both started voting for more radical parties in the DUP on one side and Sinn Féin on the other, who since have held sway largely in Northern Ireland. I think we're seeing something now very similar throughout the rest of Britain, where people have lost faith in the main parties. You know, the fact that we've had a stagnant economy now for getting on for 20 years. The fact that people's living standards have crashed. The fact that, you know, things just don't work in the country anymore and public services are crumbling. We're seeing social disintegration break out. And people look at the two main parties and say, you have brought this in. You are responsible for this. And time again, we voted for you, but you've failed us. Therefore, if you can't fix things, we're going to throw in our lot with whether it's Farage on the right or Polanski on the left. The two main parties have brought this on themselves.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Paul. We live in such interesting political times, and it's always good to be able to sort of join hands and fight the forces of, well, whatever you want to call it, together for a change. OK, listen, we're going to be taking a short break, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts on everything we've been discussing. We're going to be doing calls just after this, but I'd also like to get some of your messages as well. If you want to have a chinwag with me, and that really would be delightful, especially if you've not picked up the blower and spoken to me before. The number is 03444 1000. It's your normal network rate, so it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. It's not like phoning Babe Station. You can also send me a WhatsApp message on that number, 03444 1000, or leave me a voice note. 8722 is the number to send good old-fashioned text. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you type out your message. I'm really looking forward to opening the floor to all of you out there, whoever wants to partake in our communal catharsis. Well, doesn't cost like the same amount as a private therapy, does it? So you may as well give it a go. That's coming up just after this.
Good morning to you.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing, it is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Carr Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, hello, hello. Right, let's do some messages, then we'll do a call, shall we? Alex, so Blair sends our young to university for degrees that saddles them with lifelong debts but can't get them a job. Our youngsters get one job to every 27 given to a foreigner. It's disgusting. DEI has made us pariahs in our own country, and their answer is to push them into the army as war fodder. All this while importing rapey fake gay men or cowards fleeing women and children in their own country. What's the point in fighting for this country when they're giving it away from under our feet? Maybe reverse DEI, stop importing foreigners and send illegals home. Then we might feel we have something left to fight for. We're even last in line for police help when we're dying, for goodness sakes. My young won't be going anywhere near the army, thanks, says Sarah in London. Tom in Kent says, your liberal-tinged hysteria does not change the fact that Restore have never uttered any of the bile that you just accused them of standing for. Colour of skin has never been discussed by them, says Tom from Kent. Tom, it has, on my show. I had Charlie Downs, the campaign director, sit here right now talking exactly about that. You can actually go back and watch it. And then I had another young lad called Young Bob come on and double down on the same. Charlie is the campaign director for Restore. He doesn't seem to talk about anything other than ethnicity. So on this one, you are wrong. I'm afraid you were wrong. Now, it might not be that Uncle Rupert says that, but one should ask him what he really does think. Because if you've got your campaign manager and your apparatchiks who go around in TV studios, you know, banging out your line and doing that on social media, saying one thing, and then you're going to say another, then which is it? Which one is it? Because I think we need to know, because if Tom from Kent doesn't like racist bile, then, you know, perhaps you ought to clarify whether you agree with your campaign manager. OK? It's very simple. Tom, go back, watch those interviews. They went pretty big at the time, and I've been getting it in the neck ever since. And Tom, would you agree that they shouldn't keep saying disgusting things to me, such as, you know, well, I'm not even going to repeat some of the things that they say to me because it's 20 past 11 in the morning. The amount of women, by the way, that I've had contact me saying I have never, ever been subjected to the sort of aggressive, vile, disgusting attacks I'm getting online from the supporters of that party. And these are very level-headed, you know, non-thin-skinned, non-Me Too movement, good, solid, right-wing women saying this. In fact, one of them messaged me saying, you know, come the revolution, they're more likely to shoot me in the head than any Islamist. And that's how I feel. So I'm sorry, this isn't me taking a side. This all comes because I conducted an interview saying, what is your policy? And that is what was said. And then, because I asked a very simple question, which they then answered, getting themselves into that hole, who got the blame? Me. I'm just trying to do my job here. And, you know, it's funny, isn't it? You can actually lay out, you know, to the public a list of facts with links saying, read that for yourself. This happened. Have a look at that. Here is my evidence. And what do? Oh, they just reply in memes and insults, don't they? There's something mad and cultish about the people who seem obsessed with that party. It's deranged. It's like, look, anyone can vote for who they want to vote for. That is fine. OK, it is fine. But that doesn't negate the fact that the hurling of abuse, some of the really extreme things that are being said in the name of that party, have not been shut down or rebuked by the leadership, have they? There's nothing been done to control it. So where do they stand? I think we all deserve to know, because it's not funny It's not a game. I'm not doing this because I'm trying to curry favour with anyone or been promised this or that or whatever else people want to accuse me of. I do my job as a journalist. I call out Zach Polanski when he says mad stuff. I'll call out anybody when they say mad stuff. I'll criticise reform when they say things that I think are balmy or that, you know, if they're conducting themselves seems short of a sandwich or two in their picnic. I will agree with Starmer if Starmer does something good, and as much as I'll chastise him when I think he's doing things that are bad. That is my job. And I know that, you know, when you live in the public eye, you're going to get attacked for things, but I certainly did not expect the level of, frankly, juvenile hysteria coming out of, you know, what appears to be an extremely cultish following of this new movement on social media. It is frightening. And what I would say to you, Tom, from Kent, is you might want to have a look at what the campaign manager and his cronies say. OK? Just have a look. Make up your own mind. That's all I ask people. Do your research and make up your own mind. And if you still want to vote in that direction, be my guest. That's a democracy. Anyone can stand and they can put forward whatever positions they like within reason. Although I would agree with many people in Restore when it comes to saying anyone should stand. I don't think that should include foreign nationals. I think that is a mockery of our system. If you want to turn this place into Karachi, go back to Karachi. Don't bring your politics here, sunshine. I think we need to tighten up our system in that regard. So there are guardrails on democracy. But look, you want to vote Rupert Lowe? Vote Rupert Lowe. I ain't going to stop you. But do your research. Find out if you agree with all of that stuff. Go. Take yourself to the polling station and put an X in the box next to, the name of the candidate. But if you look a bit further and think, actually, like Tom seems to be suggesting, I don't want anything to do with politics that is bringing in ethno-nationalism, well, you might want to find out who is talking about that stuff and who isn't, and just ask questions, OK? Just make people accountable, because we do only have one vote and we've got to be careful how we use it. And so everyone should do their research and then vote for whoever they want. It's not Alex Phillips to decide who you vote for. I can sit in here and say what I like against any party as a journalist, as someone, as a commentator, as someone who is, here to give an opinion, but it doesn't mean you have to agree with me, and I certainly do not expect that from you. But I do think rather than, saying that I've got liberal-tinged hysteria and then, go and do your research, Tom. It's not liberal-tinged hysteria. I'm just giving you information. Nothing hysterical about pragmatism and facts, my friend. Right, let's do some calls now. Let's speak to Pat in London. Hello, Pat.
Oh, good morning. Good morning. Yeah,
it is good morning. We're still there, don't you worry. Not yet. Sun's not over the yard arm yet, my friend.
No, well, fair enough. If you look at Conservative, they have a 1922 committee. And if you look at Labour, they have a National Executive Committee. If you take any, it's like if you took Tony Blair out of Labour, right, it might weaken them, but they don't fall over like a pack of cards.
Yeah.
If you take Maggie Thatcher or David Cameron or Rishi Sunak out of Conservatives, it don't take. It's a group thing.
Yeah. But
my point is, its reform is Nigel Farage, top, middle, and bottom, basically. If he was to walk away or whatever, it would lose its mojo, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say. Look, I would think that if the party were here, they'd say we have a board, we have branches, we have a constitution, all the things that a sort of, mature political party would need to have. But at the same time, Nigel Farage is eponymous with the brand because it is new, because it's the brand that is sort of, we've had Farage for 30 years and then different names of entities below him. And so in many respects, you're right. You kind of think without Farage, what is the entity underneath? I think he's probably quite cognizant of that himself, if I'm honest with you, and it does, it does actually, I think, does pose a problem. But then, perhaps that is because he's not new himself. He's been in politics for 30 odd years now. He's basically a veteran. He's one of the most experienced out there. But you're right. The idea of having this sort of, multi-policy machine underneath him, trying to grow its branches and build from the bottom up is a fairly new endeavour. And so it does, I can understand why people would say, well, if you took the main man out of it, are we very familiar with what goes on underneath?
They might have not been fun. All jokes aside, not saying now, but in the near future or intermediate future, they might have to maybe do without Nigel Farage. You might have to say, well, look, Nigel, you've been a great, you've built the party up from nothing, but, well, we don't need you anymore.
But then if you say we don't need you anymore, you're saying that without him, everything crumbles. So it sounds that doesn't seem to make sense to me. You're saying, well, if he goes, what happens next?
Look, hello?
Yeah?
Hello? Look, what I'm saying, yeah, maybe you're misconstruing what I'm saying, but they will have to be a party that is big enough, here's at the top of the totem pole. Maybe in some point in the future you're going to have to cut the top of the totem pole off and make do and try and be an influential party without him.
But maybe the thing is, what I'm suggesting here is, yes, Nigel Farage has been a campaigner and an MEP for, almost 30 years now, whereas this political entity is new and it's only got a small handful of politicians. Perhaps that is why they took people in the Conservative Party to, extend the breadth of experience within their ranks. But, one might say in France, for example, there was the creation of En Marche at the same time as Emmanuel Macron. He became president. Now En Marche is considered the establishment. And there are a whole load of other people out there going, the problem with reform is they've become the establishment. I mean, it seems to me that man can't win, but then that's politics, isn't it? Pat, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak to Phil, who's in London. Hello, good morning, Phil.
Alex. How on God's green earth does reform fix all the issues of the UK's current economic malaise when all of the underpinnings of this was started by Thatcherism back in the 80s, and Farage is a staunch Thatcherite. If you look at the breakdown of demography of some of Reform's cohort, I think it's about 30% of Red Wall voters. They don't need any more Thatcherism. They've had enough of Thatcherism. They need the opposite.
I mean, look, what I would say is this. I've known Nigel for 20 years, and I think he greatly admires Margaret Thatcher, but I remember back in my UKIP days, UKIP 1.0 in 2013, 14 and 15, I don't think the economic agenda looked very Thatcherite then. And certainly when Richard Tyson, David Bull was sort of babysitting Reform UK before it sort of became a force under Farage again, a great many of the policies did talk about things such as nationalisation. Look, you'd have to delve into the speech made by Robert Jenrick, because he's shadow Chancellor for the party, isn't he? Shadow Treasury Minister, whatever you want to call it. And go back to see what he outlined. I don't think it's... Look, this is the problem with vibes politics, when people say, oh, that's Thatcherite, that's this, that's that. I think we're in a situation now where putting these labels on isn't necessarily helpful. And a bit like I said earlier in response to Tom from Kent, because there's so much noise out there, because people now live off this ever-changing supply on social media with vibes and sweeping statements that the algorithms favour, what we need to do is go back and listen to the words that these politicians are saying, whether it's the Green Party, the Labour Party, Reform, Lib Dems, I don't care, and actually pick it apart for ourselves, because there's so much static and noise out there that I don't really know what's going on half the time.
I could tie every single politician in knots on economics. I study macroeconomics. I'm 57 years of age. I've seen what's been going on. I've seen all the privatisation. I've seen all the promises from Labour and the Conservatives, and nothing ever has amounted to anything. So we've still got white water privatised. We've still got high costs of transport.
So what did you make of when Robert Jenrick took to a podium and outlined Reform's economic position? Would you call it Thatcherite?
It's easy to say something. Doing it is the acid test, isn't it? It's like Starmer with his pledges. I despise Labour. I used to be a Labour man. That was my thing. I was a Labour person. But the thing is I look at there's a flag paper between in terms of economic policies. Labour, if you look at all the money that was pivoted to Labour when they knew that they were going to get in after the Tories, all the big money that went to the Tories to back the Tories up went to Labour. It's just a game for basically the lobby groups that back all these people. There is no serious politician that's going to turn around and jump off the gravy train. So Robert Jenrick can turn around and say, I'm going to paint the sky green, and everyone's going to go, hey! But when he gets into power, all the people people behind him will say, no, that can't be done. You can't do
well,
that.
no, this is the interesting thing, isn't it? Because, you know, 1 minute they were scrapping the OBR, now they're not. I mean, look, all political parties seem to now be down these sort of mad wormholes of what can they do, what will they deliver, what are they promising? Is it just sort of, you know, a sort of, you know, verbal diarrhea? Can it actually be achieved? And this is why things have become so, in some respects, even more murky in a globalised world with so many quangos, with a very deeply interconnected worldwide economy where, unfortunately, the markets do seem to have a bit of an upper hand when it comes to deciding what politicians do. And with so much choice out there, and yet so much misinformation, so much noise, so much vacuous promises, and again, so much just, you know, blank platitudes. What we all need to do, like I said, is sit down and really challenge our politicians and ask them what it is they actually believe, what they plan to deliver, how they are going to do it. Because otherwise we just seem to be standing in the middle of the town square with everyone screaming at each other, trying to shout the loudest, drowning everything out, and what we're not left with is any sort of, you know, sensible, cogent argument from anybody. And so we as voters, I think it's harder going on our, you know, supermarket shop during election for policies than it's ever been. But it's on us really to try and dig into those promises, dig into those policies, dig into those pledges and say, what are you going to do? But I would warn people this as well. We're not in a general election. Yes, there's a by-election taking place, a very critical one indeed. But the other problem that I think is sort of really strangulating UK politics and Western politics is we're in constant campaigning mode. Constantly polling, constantly focus groups, constantly being reactive politics, night and day, rather than proactive politics. If you're constantly following the ever-changing direction of the wind of public opinion, you're not really doing your job of governing. That's one of my big arguments. OK, we're going to take a short break now. And talking about conviction politics, well, Nigel Farage has called for Britain to potentially roll out a total ban on cousin marriage. We're going to be catching up with Emily Schubert, who's a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, on quite what Sweden has been doing in that regard and what she potentially thinks we need to do here in the UK. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Now, looks like Sweden are finally getting their act together after being the sort of most extreme case of Western so-called neoliberalism that we have seen, perhaps, well, when everyone started blowing up Malmo. they suddenly went, maybe unfettered migration from the Middle East and the Maghreb isn't such a good idea after all. Well, they've come out and they have banned, a total ban indeed, on cousin marriage. And Nigel Farage has said that Britain should very much look into doing the same. Farage says Sweden has just banned cousin marriage. It causes serious health problems in certain communities and it's inherently un-British. We must have a serious conversation about a ban in Britain too. Well, here we go. Let me, shall I give you the outline of Alexism on this one? No, we should not have cousins getting married in the United Kingdom. It's gross. It is incest. It leads to birth defects. It's very simple, hard no. It's not our culture and it's not okay. And while you're at it, let me tell you what else isn't our culture and is not okay. It is not okay to segregate children into schools based upon their faith, where they're being taught Lord knows what in the classroom, where they're essentially potentially being educated in a way that has nothing to do with British cultural mores or British values, where they don't know how to play together in a sandpit because they're told they shouldn't. In fact, let alone they shouldn't play with other British kids, boys and girls shouldn't even be allowed to play together. That must end. While you're at it, how about we don't have head coverings for little girls? By all means, when you're 16 years old, if you want to wear a hijab, be my guest. You're probably just about old enough to make a choice on those things. Other than that, in my mind, you're a kid being forced to do something very adult, because essentially wearing a head covering is saying, well, you better do that, otherwise men might look at you in a funny way. Don't get me started on face coverings. Hard no. We like making eye contact. We like seeing mouth moves. It's for security. It's also for integration and good neighbourliness. And what that represents, what that suggests about viewpoints and attitudes towards women has got nothing to do with this nation. Absolutely not. And when it comes to all of that and talking about faith schools, how about we look into the foreign funding of mosques and faith schools and NGOs and so-called charities? Whose job are you doing? Whose narrative are you pushing and who's paying you to do so? Because if it's anything connected with the IRGC and the Muslim Brotherhood, goodbye, shut down immediately. And while you're at it, the people running your organisation might get a knock on the door from the boys in blue. And the same should be said of radical preachers. It seems like France has suddenly found a way to start deporting people who turn around and espouse more choice sections of the Quran than are fitting with European ideals. We need to do the same. We cannot have these people speaking against our country, against our religion, imperiling us, endangering women. Go away. Get out. If you're going to be spouting radical hatred and trying to brainwash people and turning against the country that they're living in, you should not be in this country. You are a threat to it. Then let's add to that the inhumane slaughter of animals, shall we? Because I don't care what religion you come from. In this country, we have very high standards of animal welfare, and that to me is very British, and that is something that we should stand up for and say that is what we believe in. Now look, if it comes to, it means that if you want to get a certain type of slaughtered meat, you have to import it from somewhere, well, it's going to have to pass all our standards anyway. But okay, fine, I might be able to allow the importation, but I do not want abattoirs in this country bleeding animals out in agony. That is not what we do. I find it sickening. I think most people in this country find it sickening because we have always had the best forms of shepherdry and slaughter, and we have been proud to stand up for that. While we're at it, honour killings, FGM. Oh, let's add to that family voting now, shall we? Horrible, corrupt practices that we have imported from countries which, again, have not been born domestically in the UK, are at complete odds with our values and pose a danger to society. And polygamy, oh, you want to bring all your wives over here and get state benefits for the lot of them? Forget it, sunshine, because you can only marry one person in this country. Otherwise, you're a bigamist. You can't come from somewhere else and suddenly change our rules. Forget it, sunshine. And as it, when it comes to all of this stuff, people are trying to push to make sure that Britain adopts these alien cultures that to a great many Brits are frankly repugnant. We need to be looking at some of the faith-based cartels within our public services, within our institutions, and say we need to have, frankly, faithless public services. By that I mean people who do the job of governing and aren't trying to push the agenda of a certain cultural enclave or a certain minority religion. And as it happens, I might call it faithless, but most of our country's culture, our democracy and our values have been based on Christianity, whether you like it or not. And that is how it should stay, because guess what? Christianity has done great things for this country for the past 2 millennia. It's been the glue that held us together. It's been our moral standard. And ever since we decided to have a go at that and took God out of the equation, we've got all these mad neo-religions and everyone falling out. And actually, if you look at Christendom, 95% of all the brilliant things added to the world has come from it. So clearly, it's a recipe for success, and I suggest we stick to it. Thank you ever so much, ladies and gentlemen. That was a party election broadcast brought to you on behalf of me and only me, who's not even standing for election. OK, let's take a short break. Back after this.
Good morning to you. This is Claude, the Home of Comedy.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, after my little proclamation of what Alexism might look like, it's interesting. We've just had some breaking news, which is that brothers Mohammed Fahir Amaz and Mohammed Ahmad, they are the two who were embroiled in an altercation, let's say, at Manchester Airport, infamously. They are not going to be facing a third trial on allegations that they assaulted PC Zachary Marsden at Manchester Airport in July 2024. That's news coming out of Liverpool Crown Court, and that's because the jury apparently could not reach a verdict on 2 occasions. And it's been decided that, well, they're not going to have to go through it again. Hey, brilliant success. I'm sure we're all leaping for joy at that. Why? Why couldn't the jury reach a verdict? That's what I want to know. Who was on that jury? What was the composition of that jury? Just speculating. Let's talk now to the amazing Isabel Oakeshott. But before we do, Isabel has obtained incredible exclusive close-up footage of migrants boarding a dinghy in Dunkirk, and that was on Saturday, the 23rd of May. And guess what? The French police just sat there and, I don't know, twiddled their thumbs. Let's have a look.
You need to be careful. If you're shaking like that, you are near hypothermia. Do you understand? You need to get the blanket. You can go to hospital. Mate. Sorry, I don't understand. Ambulance. Ambulance. Ambulance.
Let's speak to Isabel now. Isabel, you pulled another blinder. More brilliant exclusive footage from you. Tell me what you found out.
Well, thank you so much for that. I found that quite hard to listen to, actually. And when you can see the footage as well, it is quite shocking imagery, very unusual. The photographer who we're calling just Adrian, the nowhere photographer, went right up to his shoulders in the water, right next to a whole group of migrants that were struggling in the water as they attempted to board an already very, very overloaded dinghy. And we took this footage, the nowhere photographer working also with Christian Drogan, the undercover migrant who spent some days in northern France this week as well. What we wanted to do is document this first bit of the summer surge of crossings. This has been a bumper week for migrant crossings, as we predicted it would be. And I think this footage does a number of things. I think it shows you the human side of what is going on. Those of us on the right who are desperate to stop the boats, and that is millions and millions of people in this country, in the UK, are often sort of made out to be inhumane in some way. You know, let them keep coming. It would be wrong to turn back the boats. What this footage shows is just how damn dangerous it is to be getting on those boats in the first place. The photographer very compassionately is trying to help a young man who is about to go into hypothermic shock. The police, meanwhile, are simply standing in a row on the beach just by the lapping water. Quite literally, they do not want to get their feet wet. And a bunch of these migrants who failed to get on the boats, and you can hear the desperation in their cries, had to wade back towards the beach, at which point all the police really do is perhaps alert some ambulance person to bring them some blankets, but no attempt whatsoever to stop what's going on. I don't call it humane to let these people keep coming. I call it cruel, I call it negligent, I call it irresponsible. And frankly, in terms of the French police, I think they're defrauding us.
I think you're absolutely right. It seems it doesn't matter how much we give to them, they still don't really want to do the job. Belgium seems to do make a far better effort of stopping things. But let's talk about this incredible story as well, which is that now rural inland villages are the target for people smuggling migrants and drugs into the UK, because big crime cartels are using yachts to leave the seas and sort of, you know, go up our waterways further inland in order to do their dodgy business, so much so that they're having to be signs put up around the British countryside warning people, saying, look, if you've seen any unusual activity from boats late at night, please do report it. And there have been, for instance, there have been an operation by the Border Force intercepting a yacht off the coast of Cornwall carrying 20 Albanians. A lot of this stuff, it seems to me, largely connected to Albanian criminal cartels. There have been similar incidences in Chichester, in Armine, a Yorkshire village on the banks of the River Aire. I mean, you know, we're being so infiltrated. There's a big report today in the Telegraph where they've actually been sort of interacting with one of these big Iraqi people traffickers and smugglers. And what's very clear is they know our system inside out and back to front. Far from smashing the gangs are smashing us.
That's absolutely right. And yeah, I was very interested to read about these yachts and the way that people smugglers are sort of advertising yacht crossings now. If you don't want to slum it on a totally overcrowded, inadequate rib, you can do it in the lavish way. But I don't think that many illegal immigrants are crossing in that manner, and obviously because it's too expensive. But I think that is very much a part of the whole interconnected criminal racket. And the bottom line is, it's not just our borders down on the south coast, down near and around Dover, that are porous. It's basically the entire country. And word has naturally got around, and it got around a long time ago, that the British authorities have no idea who's coming and going. And so, you know, come one, come all. And that is exactly what's happening. I have long thought that our completely right focus on the small boats crisis has meant we're neglecting other areas of illegal immigration. And I'm doing some work on that, and I'm going to be very excited to bring the results of that investigation, which is still ongoing, perhaps next week or the week after.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. Let's now talk about the fact that the Home Office is spending millions of our money on new boats and repairs to its existing fleet to try and, well, it's not to try and stop the boats, is it? Largely what happens when they send out their, their rigs, their rigid hull inflatable boats, their ribs, is they just go and pick up these migrants and bring them over to the United Kingdom. And the difficulty is every time you read these reports, the traffickers know what's going on. They say, you get halfway, don't worry, the UK will pick you up, then you'll be put in a hotel, don't worry, it's almost guaranteed. When you get there, claim you're from some sort of no one's ever heard of you tiny little tribe in the mountains of Kurdistan or whatever it's supposed to be, some stateless individuals which once upon a time numbered about, 50 odd people, but apparently about hundreds of thousands of people arrived in the UK as suddenly from this particular tiny little ethnic group. Our whole system is totally broken. We're being taken for a ride because our politicians in Westminster just seem to have no willpower to do anything about it.
Absolutely right. Year after year after year, this just gets bigger, it evolves. I know that technically the figures this year to date are slightly down on what they were this time last year. I would hazard a guess that by the end of the year, that will have evened out. It may well be that this is a bigger year than last year. The weather plays a key part in this. And what I do know from all the on-the-ground research that I have had commissioned and worked with Christian, the undercover migrant, on, is that demand for crossings massively outstrips the supply of boats to take people across. So it's not that demand for this is drying up whatsoever. What is happening is that people smugglers have so much business that they are overwhelmed and they can't actually get boats over fast enough. And remember, a key thing that I've tried to highlight again and again, the vast majority of people that are coming over in this manner are not paying in any kind of conventional way. They are being given free passage in exchange for what?
Well, exactly. In exchange for what, indeed? One assumes is working in the black market, or they're just shipping in their terrorists and criminals. Let's talk about a little sort of tidying up around the edges that the UK government seems to be committed to doing, which is rolling out an AI facial recognition tool that aims to detect adult migrants posing as children. They're going to be using that to analyse the UK's borders next year. The thing is, though, there's still people coming across, isn't it?
I mean, I'm in favour of any such technology that makes that kind of thing easier, although a lot of it could be resolved with simple common sense. It's pretty unusual for 12-year-olds to be 6 foot with moustaches. And we've seen ridiculous cases of this. And I think that I'm not an expert on what the existing system is for determining age, but it's certainly one of the methods used has been some kind of scanning of palms. And one of the problems is that, unbelievably, migrants appear to have the right to decline to have their palms scanned. You just can't make this stuff up. Like, you can't. On what planet is that an unreasonable request?
The planet, sadly, we seem to be living on, Isabel. I've got to say goodbye to you because we've run out of time, but you can watch Isabel's amazing package on our Talk Social, so make sure you get on and do that. I am back just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. That's us in the last hour of the show. Thank you so much for keeping me company thus far, and buckle up because there's still a lot to talk about, and we're about to have a brilliant guest join us in just a moment. But before that, I just want to reappraise you of some new news that is now in the ecosystem. You will, of course, remember the two brothers from Manchester Airport when their arrest went viral. Bystanders filmed the aftermath on mobile phones when these two young men seemingly were being sort of pinned down by armed police. And of course, the police got into trouble for that. There was protests with people coming to the streets holding Black Lives Matter placards saying the police should be defunded. Oh, they never skip a beat, do they? Now, it turns out that those two brothers who have faced two trials now, the jury in both situations have failed to reach a verdict. Despite it taking 150 days for prosecutors to announce PC Marsden would not be charged with any offence, he was just doing his job trying to protect the general public. When it comes to the punch-throwing Mohammed Fahir Armaz and Mohammed Ahmad, both from Rochdale, who were charged with assaulting 3 officers, well, it seems to me the jury could not really reach verdicts on whether the brothers had assaulted PC Marsden. Now, Ahmad was convicted of causing actual bodily harm to PC Ward and assaulting PC Cook. But despite the jury sitting for an unprecedented amount of time, they weren't able to reach a final decision, and it's now been decided a third trial will not take place. Let's speak to the brilliant Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer, and of course the director of the Academy of Ideas, a very incredible, outstanding institution we're very grateful to have in this country. But let's first of all start off with talking about what Burnhamism is, because I don't know. I'm not even sure he knows. If he does know, he has now changed his mind very quickly, because I think he's decided that people of Makerfield probably might not like it. Claire, what do you make of this rather intriguing rift that's going on within the Labour Party with Tony Blair's intervention of bringing back centrism, Burnham saying, no, we don't want a sort of, a continuation of Thatcherism, we need more state intervention. I mean, it sort of leads us back to where we've been all along, which is what is Starmerism? What is any ism when it comes to what the left-wing want to do to this country? Because they seem to love a good ism when it applies to us, pointing the finger at us for all of our isms, racism and homophobism and all the rest of it. But when we ask them what do they stand for, they're not able to give us a straight answer.
Well, I'm rather enjoying the fact that there's the sort of battle of the essays. And of course, I'm the director of the Academy of Ideas. I think it's great there's a battle of ideas. I mean, they're all very long essays, I have to say. I discovered that Starmer has a Substack, which I hadn't known because I don't think very many people read, but they're all writing what the Labour Party should stand for. Surely a healthy development for any political party to try and work that out. From the point of view of the public, you might think, God, it's taken a bit of time. I mean, first of all, one lot's been, Starmer has been in government before for 2 years and we haven't been able to work it out. And Andy Burnham, for all his Burnhamerism, I can't say it either, whatever Burnham is about to stand for, has already announced, I think we're on 6 U-turns of things which he felt very passionately about before, but because he's now standing in Makerfield, he can't really say that he would stand for now. So it's like what he believes is hard to know. But let's take it at face value. The main thing I'd say is he's attacking neoliberalism. And it's this idea that for 40 years, the state has been rolled back. I would just like to say that neoliberalism is one of those kind of myths, because the truth is, over the last 40 years, we've seen a huge expansion of the state, massive numbers of laws, regulations, parastate bodies, all the red tape that comes with that, regulators everywhere you look with enormous powers. So this idea that the state is not doing anything, is not involved, even I think the Tory privatisation was, to be honest, a bit of a con, because they kind of outsourced to the private sector, it looked like, but a lot of the time they were getting state monopoly afforded to them or given subsidies. So the state has not been rolled back at all. And in fact, if you look at huge issues that Andy Burnham cares about, like housing, there are fewer homes today being built today. Why? Because of state regulations, because of state planning rules. And he says he wants more social housing. Well, unless you actually roll back the state and all the regulations, you won't be able to build a thing. He said he wants to have state water, right? Well, I just saw Matthew Lesh. I mean, you know, in some ways, the water is such a disaster, privatised water, that you sort of have some sympathy. But then you look at it and you think, oh, my God, Matthew Lesh did a funny thing, which was one of the commentators on this said, there's 7,500 pages of legislation affecting water and regulations and SIs and environmental agency rules and so on and so forth, which means that you just cannot build any infrastructure in relation to water. I mean, when you think about that, that's absolutely mad, right? We are not able to do anything because there's too much state. So I just think it's a myth, this idea there's no state. Everywhere you look, there's the state.
Yeah, no, but this is it. It's not just our state. We've still got the blooming supranational state as well. And, you know, Labour government dragging us ever more closer to Brussels. We've got, you know, international treaties under the UN. It seems to me that now we just sort of constantly wade within a quagmire of regulations and red tape that nothing can be done. And if anything sort of symbolises this, it's blooming HS2. In fact, I read a story today in the papers when I was on the train coming down there that a deportation centre's not going to be built because of environmental charity protesting it, probably, you know, some sort of newt somewhere. And it seems to me that, you know, when I look at the world, and I think you and I probably share very similar political viewpoints, you just think we don't go anywhere because we just keep creating. Nothing gets repealed, nothing gets put in the dustbin of history, mind the quote, but things keep being announced. It's like, we're now going to have a regulation for this, we're going to have a day representing that, we're going to have the lanyard focusing on this. And it's all very well. It's like buying more and more clothes to your wardrobe and never getting rid of everything until you can't shut the wardrobe door. I feel like that's where we're at in the United Kingdom, and nobody knows what anybody stands for anymore, particularly in the Labour Party, it seems.
Well, I think that the problem is that you can write these profound things, but you have to think what the consequence. I've just explained that they can't build a reservoir because of how much state there is. But, you know, Andy Burnham is the kind of guy who'd say, we want young people and unskilled workers to be able to get new jobs. But actually, it's become too expensive to hire younger and unskilled workers because of state intervention, i.e. laws that have been passed by the state. Now, what does he say about that? He can say he wants a kind of, you know, Manchesterism style growth, whatever that is. What we need is huge amounts of economic growth in order to be able to facilitate any of the idealism that Andy Burnham espouses. But what do we get? He hasn't said he's going to repeal the disastrous energy policies that we have, which are all state imposed, like net zero targets. The green agenda, which is a dogma, means that we are not able. So it's not that I want to explain. I am not like a big, exciting enthusiast for private enterprise. But I think this notion that the state is the answer is a real problem. But conversely, guess what? There are things that we want the state to do. We want the state, for example, to run prisons properly. We want the state to cope on the borders of our nation and stop people getting in who are not meant to be getting in. And we want the state to remove them if they get in illegally. And the state seems unable to do any of those things. I'm obsessed with the Nottingham inquiry and the terrible thing that happened with Callaghan, that the mentally ill man who killed 3 people in Nottingham.
Yeah.
And if you look at that inquiry, and in fact, if you look at what happened in Southport with Axel Rudder-Cabana, you'll discover that this was a failure of the state to protect citizens from dangerous people. So in some ways, I want a state that is able to operate efficiently where it's necessary, and to get out of the way and remove itself from any possibility of dynamism and creativity, and stop getting in the way of things which might lead to both economic growth, but also us having a different kind of country than we've got at the moment, which is just stop. So Burnham's essay, as much as I don't want to stop thugging off essays, just is like the same old tropes over and over. And he says, we made the buses work better. Brilliant. All for that. But I mean, that's not enough to turn this country around. And we need a huge different kind of strategy in order to do that.
Yeah, do you know, I always say we need to get back to the basics. I like to say it's the 3 Fs: food, fuel and frontiers, and we don't seem to have any idea of how to treat our farmers or be self-sufficient when we know as an island if things go tonto in maritime routes, that's it, we're done for. Fuel, well, the net zero stuff is a disaster, and frontiers, we don't even seem to have any borders anymore. And then instead it's all been replaced by lanyardism. And I want to ask, talking about lanyardism, and it's kind of what you're talking about, the Valdo Calacane inquiry. How on earth did this schizophrenic, you know, forego taking his medicines or, you know, any sort of incarceration to protect the general public? Well, because racism. Same with Axel Rudakabana, who, you know, they'd stopped referring him to Prevent because it started to look a little bit racist. And now you've got the tragic story of young Henry Novak, the 18-year-old who has died while being arrested by the police for allegedly being a racist. And it transpires now that his assailant was the one, after stabbing the guy, this Sikh man, phoned the police and said, I've suffered a racist attack, to cover his back, disposed of his weapon. The police turn up, and because they're all brainwashed into hearing racism, gotta act because racism, a young man dies. He dies, and I haven't seen Starmer say anything. I've not seen front pages of newspapers particularly kicking off about it. And yet when it was, you know, George Floyd in America, we all had to, well, we didn't have to take the knee, but so many people blimmin' well did. It became a new national religion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shocking story. And it's a shocking story because it indicates that, as I mentioned, there are things that the state should do that they should do without fear or favour, and policing is one of them. And I think we can all recognise that there's been a problem with the police in terms of its politicisation. They've all been on, it seems to me, equality, diversity and inclusion courses up to their neck. And they just basically, they're kind of triggered. You know, so if somebody says that's a hate crime, they immediately accept that that was a hate crime. If somebody says this is, you know, we've seen loads of examples, haven't we, of where they say, oh, that's exclusionary of trans people, we need a trans inclusive policy, and they lose their minds and basically, you know, go on pride marches. It's only just been clarified by the law that the police are not meant to go on pride marches, join in as trans allies, not because they're policing the demo, but they're actually going as participants. And this example of this tragic story is a situation where officers turn up, and because somebody said the word racism, as you say, they immediately think they know who the culprit is, and they immediately think that the person who says that they were racially attacked must be the victim, when it was completely the other way around. That would indicate that policing is completely messed up. It doesn't know how to make a distinction between, first of all, an accusation and the truth. And also, it's like there's magic words that you can say, like hate crime or racism or transphobia or Islamophobia, and they behave as though they're student union, you know, activists rather than police officers representing the law and order forces of the United Kingdom. And that's scary. And in this instance, utterly tragic, because a man died. You're absolutely right as well that Valdo Calacane, when he said, and he was very, very seriously ill, by the way,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I don't like having needles and I don't want an injection and I don't really like being incarcerated under a section. They said, oh, yeah, well, we don't want to be seen to be incarcerating black men because there's a disproportionately high number of black men who are held in psychiatric hospitals, so we'll let him out. And at one point, he basically went into the psychiatric hospital with a hammer, which he'd stolen, having also written text, I think, saying he wanted to kill people. And when they discharged him far too quickly, they gave him the hammer back. I mean, you couldn't make this up. And this was all about sensitivity to his vulnerability, because he's vulnerable, rather than recognizing that maybe it's because of the illness or whatever, that he had a murderous intent, which he was open about. It was hiding in plain sight. But the authorities of the state, psychiatric services and the police and social workers basically were so worried about looking after a vulnerable person who could, in fact, be a victim of racism, that they jeopardised the safety of people in Nottingham, and in fact 3 lost their life. Another, by the way, was seriously injured. Same story with Southport. Anyway, that's why I want the state. I don't want to throw the state out the mix. I want the state to know what it's doing and to be very clear about what it's doing when it comes to protecting citizens, and even when it comes to running schools or running hospitals or what have you. What I don't want is the state, in terms of its bureaucratic entity, being used by Andy Burnham to get in the way of ordinary citizens who are trying to get on with their lives without the state interfering and lecturing us about how we've all got to become anti-racist allies or whatever.
I know, this is what I keep saying, lanyards kill, ladies and gentlemen. On that, have you seen this? I mean, it was out a few days ago, but I haven't been on air. The blimmin' trans tax hotline, did you see that, Claire? It's like, you know, now it's like, well, we've got to have single-sex spaces, we've got to have women-only toilets, great, thank you, but they can't let it go, can they? Apparently HMRC have established some sort of special tax hotline for trans people. I mean, I'm sorry, is wearing a dress preventing them from, I don't know, filling out their self-assessment form? I don't get it.
I know, it's so mad. I mean, this really is pathetic. But also, it's an indication of the fact that HMRC tax office has got a terrible system where you all have to wait hours and hours and hours, days, to get through to anyone, to actually talk to a human, to sort out your tax affairs. But apparently, if you're a trans person, you get a super fast service. And the only other people who get it, which, by the way, I didn't even know this, MPs or dignitaries.
Oh.
I don't know if I count. I might be able to, as a baronet, I might be able to phone up and get through super quick. I mean, that whole thing is absolutely ludicrous. But I think that's all I'm saying is that this is what the state preoccupies itself with. This is what the civil service is like. You know, they are meant to be servants of the political governing class and do what is required and so on. But they are themselves politicized around these EDI priorities, and it makes a mockery. It's no wonder people become cynical about any state bodies when this is what's going on.
Well, can I just finish on that saying, Baroness Claire Fox, on this here station, you are a dignitary to us. Thank you ever so much for coming on the show.
At least.
Funny, isn't it? You know, I didn't know MPs had a special fast-track hotline to HMRC. Funny how so many of them seem to mistakenly not pay certain tax then, isn't it? Right, let's take a short break. And after the break, we're going to drag Peter Bleksley back kicking and screaming, because now we've had that breaking news on the Manchester Airport brothers. I want to pick his brains, because this is sort of the thorniness of when it comes down to the policeman who was accused of aggressive behaviour when he was seen kicking, or seemed to be seemingly kicking the head of one of these boys. And so 150 days it took for him to be cleared of doing something terrible. Yeah, when that footage first circulated, we all went, that looks a bit much. But my understanding is actually he was totally following police protocol, because he had a firearm in his hands, which meant that you cannot hold a firearm with just one hand, is my understanding. You know, because then it can be taken off you. That left only his feet to try and control the situation. But I don't know. It's better that we get an expert on the matter. So let us catch up with Peter Bleksley on that just after this.
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Good morning.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, as I told you a bit earlier, if you were tuned in, it turns out the brothers whose violent arrest at Manchester Airport went viral will not be facing a third trial for assaulting the armed policeman who kicked one in the face. Now, when that footage first moved, very carefully cropped, wasn't it? Didn't show us what happened before the moment of armed police, as they are very often in an airport, trying to control the assailants of what looked like a very brutal attack of other policemen and women. It was cropped and it went viral, and out they all turned, didn't they? You know, banging their anti-racism drums, Black Lives Matter, back from the dead. And yet things weren't quite as we were sold, because when we saw the entire footage, well, the yobbos seem to have been given a bit of a pasting to police officers after giving a pasting to another man at the airport for upsetting their mum on a flight. And then the poor policeman who was trying to suppress the violent outbursts from those brothers, PC Marsden, faced 150 days before prosecutors announced he would not be charged with any offence. Then what happened was the brothers themselves, finally, after about 6 months of waiting, had their day in court. Now, one of them, Mohammed Fahir Amaz, was convicted of causing actual bodily harm to PC Ward and assaulting PC Cook, but jurors couldn't reach verdicts on whether the brothers had also both assaulted PC Marsden. Let's speak again to the brilliant Peter Blexey, because he gets this stuff. Peter, explain to me, in that moment, the bit of footage that went viral, where, you know, we have to cast our minds back to what was being propagated online for deliberate reasons, one assumes. What we saw was a police officer using his, you know, heavily booted foot to, you know, make contact with the head of one of these young men in an airport. And it, well, when you first looked at that footage, it did sort of look quite violent. And yet it seems to me that what's happened here is he was basically following protocol. These two young men were incredibly aggressive. He had an armed weapon to try and protect, and he was doing what was necessary at the time. Explain to me.
The key word around the use of police force is reasonable. Police officers are allowed to use all reasonable force to detain people, to prevent crime, to prevent people escaping from lawful custody. It all has to be reasonable. And of course, the circumstances vary. What might be seen as reasonable in one circumstances might be a bit over the top in another. But let's remember, when that first 4 or 5 second clip was released, it took days before a public-spirited individual released the longer 25-second clip, which painted a very different picture. But of course, as you highlighted, all the lefty lawyers and all the Labourites had all jumped on their bandwagon of being offended and completely criticised this officer without knowing any context behind these events. And of course, when the long clip was shown, what did the authorities do? They launched an investigation to try and find the person that had released that clip. How very, very typical of Britain in 2026. The officer, in my opinion, did what was reasonable, what was proportionate, and what was necessary, given the very violent situation he was having to deal with.
Now, we do know that one of the brothers has been convicted of causing ABH to PC Ward and assaulting PC Cook. But why? How critical is it that, you know, jurors have not been able to reach verdicts on whether the brothers assaulted PC Marsden, who was, of course, the police officer in the heart of all of this viral footage?
Yeah, well, of course, 2 juries now have been unable to reach either a unanimous or majority verdict. And so the Crown prosecution, and I fully understand where they're coming from, have decided not to pursue a third trial because, quite simply, any defence lawyer would stand up and say, this is a third bite of the cherry. This is not about prosecution. This is about persecution. And I think the case would be slung out even before any evidence was given. So I understand why the CPS have taken their decision, as unpalatable as that may be to many, many people. Unfortunately, that's where we're at, and that's how it will be. We'll just have to have some consolation from the fact that convictions have been achieved in relation to other assaults.
Peter, thank you ever so much for coming back on and explaining all of that to us, the brilliant Peter Blexley. Do you know, I might have a few days off and just let Peter do the show. In fact, I'm going to go on holiday this weekend, so you won't see me for a couple of weekends. It is true. Right, now, before we buzz off to advert break, let me tell you about a little thing that might interest you, a competition that we are doing. Now, the FIFA World Cup is almost here, thanks to Adidas, which is the tournament's official match ball supplier, and our good old buddies at talkSPORT. We're giving you the chance to go to the World Cup. Adidas is sending you and a friend to Dallas to see England versus Croatia live on June the 17th. That's going to involve your return flights, your accommodation, cash monies to spend in Dallas, tickets to the match, and your very own Adidas official match ball try-on-da. You can be at England's first game at the FIFA World Cup, which apparently is going to be at one of the world's best stadiums as well. Here's how you can enter.
Get ready for that winning feeling. For your chance to win, head to talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Texts and online entries cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 1st of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. See full terms and conditions at talksport.com/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. Full T's and C's at win.talk.tv.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, I thought we had put to bed all of this nonsense about men pretending to be women. Oh, no. No, doesn't matter that there's been a High Court ruling. The campaign never ends, trying to brainwash us and gaslight us into thinking that just putting on a dress suddenly qualifies you as a female. it does not. Now a debate has erupted over Marks and Spencer. Marks and Sparks, for crying out loud. Because apparently in their changing room policy, they're still allowing staff discretion on changing room access with individual lockable cubicles in gendered areas. Now, this comes from a video from this May, which showed a manager directing a customer to gender-neutral spaces and asking her to leave after filming. Can we just make it very clear that women's changing rooms are for women? Let's speak to the brilliant, tireless Baroness Sharon Davies, Conservative peer and Olympic medalist swimmer. Sharon, always great to have you on the programme. Oh, hi. M&S. You'd think M&S would know their audience by now. Before we discuss this, let's have a little look at the video that's been doing the rounds.
It's against the law because you're not providing a space for women only.
Then you can take that out with M&S and their policies. It is completely safe and it is a complete aspect.
It's not safe for women. Okay. It's not safe for women and girls. It puts them at risk. Can you not answer the question? Why should I have to change in front of a man?
Madam, can I ask you to leave the store, please, if you're going to be abusive and obviously
But I'm trying to have a conversation.
And I'm not here to deal with the legal terms of M&S. That is for you to take up with our head office and our accountability there. If you need to take it out with them, please see them.
So why should I have to change in front of a man?
Well, it's worthwhile saying that M&S has said something in relation to this video, which is our fitting areas are typically in our menswear and women's wear departments. Fitting rooms have individual lockable cubicles so our customers have a private and comfortable space to try on clothes. But the thing is this, isn't it, Sharon? It's all very well going, well, you can shut the door in the changing rooms. But women are sort of, you know, coming out, looking in the mirrors, the long view mirror. Does this fit? Does my bum look big in this? Can you help zip the back of this dress up? You know, oh, this is a bit tight. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable going to try on a frock and seeing, you know, Derek with a giant beard popping out of the changing room next to me. Why can't they? Look, if Derek wants to try on ladies' clothes, take the ladies' clothes off the rack and go to the men's changing rooms. And you know what? If the men laugh at you, have a go at the men.
Yeah, I think the thing is, it's about Marks and Spencer's knowing their audience, is that you know, you hit the nail on the head. The predominant people that go in there and probably try their clothes on are women. And women have said over and over again that they want female only, women only spaces. The guidance has come out to say that any changing room or sport or bathroom that is called female, woman, girl is sex-based. And what I think is very upsetting from the Marks and Spencer's perspective, and obviously the stuff that's been going on social media, is that they've changed the women's to, you know, mixed sex, and they haven't changed the men's. So the men still have their men's marked changing room, and the women are just expected to turn around and have mixed sex changing rooms. Now, that is the bit that's against the law, because obviously that is discrimination. You know, if you've got a men's changing room, then you need to have a women's changing room. And what I find frustrating is a store as big as Marks and Spencer's could do 3. I mean, there must be, in, you know, a lot of these multi-stores, that particular store that you showed, there must be enough space to be able to have a mixed space, a women's space, and a men's space, so that everybody is happy. And I think that's what we have to do, is we have to think outside the box a little bit more. It's not that difficult, and create some third spaces.
No, I totally agree. Or even, do you know what? If you're that sort of hypersensitive, I don't think you could last a day on planet Earth. I don't understand why they couldn't say, you know, you're more than welcome to try this on, but I'm afraid these changing rooms are the women's changing rooms. You know, we have other changing rooms available to you on the other side of the store. If you'd like me to accompany you, I can. If you face any sort of backlash, we won't stand for that. You really do deserve to be able to buy whatever you want here and say it in a nice way. It's always us who have to cede ground. And at the end of the day, the point is, women are more vulnerable. Physically, we're more vulnerable. And I say it all the time.
There is a very strong legal case to say that if you only have unisex changing rooms in a store, that is discrimination against women, full stop. So that is a legal case that I see happening in future if that's what these stores do. Because actually by doing that, you are putting women at a disadvantage. It is women that are sexually assaulted. It is women that, you know, are predominantly the targets for voyeurism. It's one of the big problems we have with these mixed sex changing rooms in leisure centres. You know, the number of voyeurism and sexual assault figures have gone through the roof. And, you know, it's very easy to drill holes in walls or to find ways around this sort of thing. And those type of men will do that. You know, that's the problem. And unfortunately, if you have bad rules, bad men will take advantage of it. So we have to have these extra protections in place for women and girls. And it's the same in sport. You know, there are ways we can include everybody, but throwing women's sport under the bus was never the solution. And it's taken us 10 years to scrape it back to a place where women don't seem to be at last entitled again to their, you know, their female sex-based sports, the same as men are. And it never affects men. Men are not losing out, you know, anywhere. Men do not lose any opportunities. They do not lose trophies or places on teams. It's just women that constantly are the ones that are losing out.
But this is it. We all have to labour under this pretence that when a certain cohort of men want to put on women's clothes, it's not to do with fetish. It's not to do with sexual urges. It's not to do with things like autogynephilia and titillation. Oh, it's all because they're persecuted, because they're born different. And yet we know, you know, if we were to publish, and a great many countries have done research into cases of genuine gender dysphoria and those which are part of a Venn diagram of, let's say, alternative sexual practices. I would have a different word for it, but there you go. But we're not allowed to talk about that.
We're very rarely actually allowed to, especially in our mainstream media, and thank goodness for you guys, you know, but mainstream media, it's really difficult to get facts and statistics. For a long time, when I was debating sport, you know, the solution and Stonewall's solution was no debate. Right, and that was the stance that they took, and that managed to stand for nearly 5 years, where we weren't even given a platform at all. And then eventually we've crept into giving a platform, and then obviously recently the IOC have changed the rules, so that's helped a great deal. But you know, for example, Ministry of Justice, MOJ figures will show you that the number of trans-identifying males that are in prison for sexual offences, those in prison, not obviously all trans-identifying men, but those in prison, 60% are in there for sexual assaults. Yeah. Number of men that are in prison for sexual assault is 18%. So to say that a trans-identifying male is not a risk is a lie. They're 3 times more of a risk statistically than a man is.
This is it. And, you know, I like what you said about, you know, bad men are going to take advantage. I've always said there's a reason people lock their front doors at night. You know, if you left your door wide open, I would suggest that, you know, 9 out of 10 people probably walk past and go cooey through the door and then maybe shut it for you, thinking, ooh, that's not a bit safe. But there's always going to be the odd person who goes, I'm going to go in and nick your telly. And that's the point. If you suddenly create a sort of ultra permissive environment where you take everybody at their word, you know, dodgy people are going to, you know, call you up, you know, going to take advantage.
It's the same. It's the same with bathrooms in schools. You know, we're finding girls are holding themselves all day long. They're not going to the bathroom. They're not drinking, you know, because their boys are going into the bathrooms and they're teasing them and they're making them embarrassed. And this is at a stage when girls are, first, their bodies are changing and you know, women, things are happening to them. The last thing they want is a boy anywhere near them. So it is girls that need that extra bit of special protection, because it's girls, unfortunately, that are nearly always the victims.
I want to talk now about this church, Sunderland Minster in Tyne and Wear, because a church has told trans women to use female-only lavatories. This is down to a Church of England Minster, which is part of the Inclusive Church Network. It shared a picture on social media, big mistake, of a sign that says all women are welcome to use these toilets, which featured pink, blue and white stripes with a trans flag. And where they said in response to, you know, accusations that they were essentially breaking the law, if women were not comfortable using lavatories in the presence of trans women, they could ask for a clergy member or volunteer to accompany them. And, you know, I'm really, as a Christian, I'm always torn on this stuff because, you know, the Bible always says just, you know, whatever people are, be nice. Be good to people, be nice to people. But under no circumstances does it say erode your own sort of, you know, disobey what God says or erode your own morals in order to be nice. And I just don't understand what goes on in elements of the Church of England when it comes to this stuff.
I mean, everybody has their own gods and their own beliefs, don't they? I mean, the point there is that they're prepared to provide a person which will escort a trans-identifying male to go into a woman's toilet if they're feeling at all at risk. Why can't they take that same person to the men's toilet and make sure they're safe? You know, if that's the question. So therefore, then the women are safe in their bathrooms and that male is safe in the male bathroom because they've had an escort, if that's what their worry is. but they're still going to escort them and break the law and put them in a women's toilet. And as I said, they are breaking the law. If the toilet says 4 females, 4 women, 4 girls, that has to be sex-based, as we know, and it was made very clear in the guidance. I find that the Church of England a little bit hypocritical over all of this. They're very keen to jump on the trans bandwagon, and if someone has a GRC, they're allowed to get married in the church. But a gay couple are not allowed to get married in the church, and you kind of have to ask, why is that? A piece of paper doesn't really change somebody's sex.
I don't know, it seems to me that the church have forgotten how to church, basically, from where I stand. That doesn't mean a lack of compassion. I always think you ought to be respectful and nice to everybody, but, it's not for the church to start reinventing the words of the Bible.
There is room, Alex, to treat everybody with respect, but at the same time, not to erode women's rights that they've fought for decades to get. And that's really the point, isn't it?
That is exactly the point. Sharon, thank you. Let's speak to Joe, who's in Bournemouth. Hi, Joe.
Hello. How are we doing?
We're doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. I was just phoning up in regards to changing rooms, and I don't quite understand why it seems to be such an issue. I popped into Primark the other day, and they have got it nailed down to a T, Alex. They have female changing rooms, and the other one is named all other genders. Full stop, job done.
Oh, I see. So the women's space is protected, and it's everything else is sort of all of the genders. But this is the thing. I don't know how many men use. You're a man. Do you tend to find yourself using changing rooms? I think most men just go, that's my shirt size, that's my collar size, I'll get that.
Yeah. Occasionally, yeah. No, I think it is. Having a daughter, I think it's very important that they do have safe spaces for changing. And I don't mind anyone coming into my area as a chap and changing or doing what they want, but I do mind them going into where my daughter is.
It seems to me, I don't know if you agree with this, but the onus is constantly being put on women. It always is, isn't it? Because women are supposed to be nice, women are supposed to be kind, women are supposed to be caring. So we are the ones who have to accept men into our changing rooms. When I think the message should be, look, if a man walks in but wants to try on a dress, if you're a man and you start attacking that person, you should not do that. But it's almost if we expect men to be brutes and horrible and beyond emotional compassion, and so women have to face a risk instead.
Yeah, not at all. And I'd happily stand up for anyone in a male changing room that wanted to wear whatever they want. But I certainly would not stand up for them being within young ladies. It's just not acceptable. It really isn't. And finally, they've put a stand on it with the court, but they're not doing enough. They're not making it happen quick enough. And nor are these businesses.
Can I ask you something off topic but slightly connected to topic? You said you had daughters, Joe.
A daughter.
A daughter, and you're calling from Bournemouth.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to ask you about your beach, because I keep reading, I've seen the crime statistics on sexual assaults, rapes. I've read multiple newspaper stories. It seems to me Bournemouth Beach isn't exactly the sort of place where you'd want your daughter to go unaccompanied anymore.
No, she's not allowed. We wouldn't let her. We won't let her go around town either. There's just too many undocumented men around. Obviously, only the other day there was a 19-year-old girl that got pulled into a toilet. Well, that was a court case. It was a while back that it happened. And obviously, it's just disgusting. And it's not just one thing that happened. That's their life over for these girls.
Yeah.
But these leftists don't seem to understand this, that these assaults, they don't just affect them for a little while. That's it for them. You're destroying these kids.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be the case. They should, in somewhere like Bournemouth, we should be able to let our children out and let them go out and not have to worry about anything, but we just can't.
It breaks my heart. I think it's outrageous. I think it's appalling. I'm about to go and spend the weekend on the south coast with my brother, and he's got a beautiful little daughter. And I just, I was speaking to his wife, and my brother and his wife, very upstanding members of the community, committed Christians. And I said, you worried about your daughter. I mean, she's too young to go to the beach by herself, but it's just, the British beach ain't what it used to be in certain parts of the UK, now that they seem to be the main locations to put migrant men. Whatever could go wrong putting men from misogynist communities where they've never even seen the flash of an ankle right next to a beach where young ladies like to wear bikinis? Who would have thought that could result in horrible crimes taking place? Joe, thank you ever so much for your candour, and thank you for your call. Right, we're going to be taking a short break, but when I come back, we're going to be talking about, make it stop. They just want to get rid of the pub, don't they? Because apparently rural landlords of pubs are now about to be hit with a so-called nice pub tax. HMRC is ordering officials to levy higher business rates on pubs in attractive locations. Oh, great. Amazing. So next time you want to go to the pub somewhere lovely in the great British countryside, you can't. It will have shut because it was too nice. When will these people stop vandalising our culture? We're discussing that after this.
This is Tour de
Brand new for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, I had a beautiful few days off because we've had lovely weather, and I did the sensible thing and got out of London and moved into the great wilds of the West Country. And I happened to meet a man in my local pub who trains up polo ponies. And I hadn't been horse riding for ages. And I said, can I come out for a hack? And he's like, yeah, let's go to the pub. Well, we're at it. So we went, oh, it's beautiful, all around the countryside. And outside the amazing pubs around me, they actually have horse car parks. I'm not joking. You've got like your beer garden, and then you've got a bit where people can park their car. Then you've actually got a pit horses only with the buckets of water and places to tie your horse up, the odd salt lick or two. So you can go for a hack, stop off, have a pint, get back on your horse. It's amazing. Who knew? I'm afraid I wasn't brought up in that world, but I live in it now, and I'm prospering, that is for sure. Well, that is indeed for the moment, because probably by the time I get back from a holiday, the pubs will all be shut down, because HMRC has ordered officials to levy higher business rates on pubs in attractive locations. And this is also taverns with playgrounds, large car parks face higher rates, as do gastro pubs. Can we leave pubs alone? I've already spoken to enough pub landlords who are saying their business rates, have gone up by a factor of 10. They're closing down at the rate of knots, and then we still have that. It's so important in rural communities. They're so important for tourism. They're so important for just well-being of society, to be able to go somewhere nice and have a great British pint while doing it. I've got a little hiking app, and you can actually set it to do a walk with a pub in the middle. What are we doing? This is British culture. Let's speak now to Jonathan Greatorex, who's the owner of the Hand Hotel and Pub in Llanarmon and co-founder of the No to Labour MPs in Pubs campaign. Jonathan, great to have you on the programme. Why can't they just leave pubs alone? Why are they specifically punishing pubs in beautiful locations?
It's unbelievable. I mean, this is they're gaslighting us now. They're telling us, oh, we're cutting your energy bills, we're cutting your rates. My business rates have gone up by 70% this year. 70%. I mean, it's unbelievable. It is. This is economic vandalism. They just clearly don't want pubs to exist. And I guess why? Everyone comes to the pub and says how awful Starmer is and how awful this chaotic government are. So of course, shut down the pubs. Let's stop people from talking about the awful government. I can't think of any other logic for this now.
I mean, your business rates have gone up by 70%. Can you tell us in real terms what that looks like? I mean, are you sitting there thinking, I'm not going to be able to keep my pub open for long?
Well, we are having really, really difficult decisions and having to make difficult decisions on a daily basis now. They're talking about, we need to get the youth back in employment. Well, we can no longer afford to employ the number of people that we used to. When we bought the Hand, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for paying staff a good level of wage, but to be able to pay staff, you have to make that dirty word a profit. But without a profit, you can't pay the staff. And this government just doesn't want business to make a profit. I think that's it. We are at the stage now where we are just unpaid tax collectors.
But I just, out of all the things that, they're putting taxes on absolutely everything that breathes, crawls, sees, hears, speaks. But when we know they keep sort of, like you said, gaslighting us into wanting to protect hospitality. And out of all the things, nothing does Britain and says Britain more than the pub. My neck of the woods in the West Country, in certain villages, you can't move for the number of coaches shipping in Japanese, Italian, Spanish, French, Americans, you name it. They come to go to these beautiful villages and they want to have a traditional British pie. It is the appeal of coming to the United Kingdom. It has a sort of, knock-on effect, not just for rural communities who without their pubs feel pretty lost and isolated, but also for tourism.
Yeah, I mean, we are unofficially the local post office. We have everything delivered to us, from tractor tires to fridges. We're the unofficial bank. People come for cash back. We're not just a business. We are the hub of the community, and this is what the government just don't seem to grasp. They're just not getting it. And I don't know what we've done to upset them, but clearly they're coming after us. And it's getting to the stage now where we're hospitable people. I mean, the clue's in the title in the hospitality industry. It's getting to the stage now we're no longer going to be hospitable to this government. It's going to get to a stage where we're going to say, you know what, we're not collecting any more VAT for you. We're not collecting any more taxes for you because, collecting VAT and taxes has a cost to a business. If you collect £1,000 VAT and by credit card, you've got to pay the charges on those credit card fees. It's ridiculous. So it's time now, this government, we are now at war with this government.
Yeah, I mean, people always sort of bemoan the price of a pint, but when you look at, like you said, energy bills going up, the taxes on alcohol, minimum wage, employers' national insurance, business rates, I mean, I don't know how else they can squeeze you next.
Well, I mean, you think about, I've just got my latest electricity bill. My VAT that I had to pay on that was £2,000. And then I had something like £300 for electricity market reform, then a couple of £100 to build a new nuclear power station somewhere, and then another £100 in extra taxes to regenerate the network. I mean, it's just like, whoa, hang on a minute. These stealth taxes have got to stop. It's as simple as that.
They really do. Well, listen, if you stock good cider, I'll come and pull a few pints for you for free. Jonathan, thank you ever so much, and keep up your campaign because, nothing's better than a good old rural pub. I've got an important message from a viewer, so important that Ted, the producer, has copied and pasted it and put it on my must-read this screen rather than read it if you have time screen. Hello, I have a worry concerning Alex Phillips today. She keeps using Derek as an example. I'm called Derek, and here where I live are a few Dereks, and her comments make my wife giggle at me. Please can she change the name she uses? Look, I'm going to tell you this, Derek. It ain't just you. This has been going on forever. Like I keep saying, I'm off to stay with my brother on the South Coast, and his oldest is 12 now, 13, something like that. Anyway, while his wife was pregnant, I kept saying, is that little baby Derek? Is that little baby Derek? Is that Derek? You're going to have Derek. My brother, after she'd given birth, my brother came back from the hospital. She was still there with Andrew, and my brother came back, and I cooked some dinner to try and help out. He looked absolutely knackered, never seen bags under someone's eyes like it. And I said, oh, you know, you're a father for the first time. And he raised a glass and said, here's to Derek. And immediately shuddered at the thought. I've been doing it for ages. When I do crosswords with my mum, if it's a 5-letter answer, my immediate response is Derek. So I'm afraid that is just a weird Alexism. I've got nothing against the name Derek. It's just, I don't know. I just use it, and it's too ingrained now. So you're just going to, look, I know that you're a patriot with a thick skin, and I like making your wife laugh at you. So I'm just going to carry on doing it. Love to you, Derek. Oh, look, here's another Derek. Here's Derek Dolan.
Good to see you.
In the house.
Derek and the Dominoes. So much to go at today. And by the way, what a cracking 3 hours that was. How do you follow it? Well, we're going to talk about cousin marriage. Is it un-British? Should it be banned? We need to have that conversation. Sweden have made that move. I don't even know why it's legal as we speak. We're going to look at Henry.
What I want to understand is it legal if you're, you know, from a certain community, but if I married my cousin, it wouldn't be legal? Is there so? I don't know where it works.
It does feel like another two-tier scenario, doesn't it?
Often is two-tier.
That is a real problem. Also breaking now, Manchester Airport brothers will not face trial for assaulting armed policemen after 2 juries failed to reach a verdict. Is this two-tier justice? A female police officer went to hospital with a broken nose, but they walk free and will be going after the authorities for their costs.
Wow, a lot coming up. What do you make, by the way, while I've got you? We've still got a few minutes. What a luxury little handover we're having.
This is like an interview.
It's like a chat, isn't it? It's Derek Dolan and Derek Phillips down the pub. Derek Keener. But what I want to know, what do you make of this horrific story? Henry Novak, the poor kid, because I haven't been on air since last weekend, this poor boy who died while being arrested by the police because they just believed automatically his assailant who had stabbed him, saying, I suffered a racist attack.
Well, it's truly shocking. And why is this not a George Floyd moment for the UK?